Hello, good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee of Portsmouth City Council here in the Guildhall. I'm Gerald Dunn-Jackson, I'm chair of the committee. Just to run through things, there's no fire alarm expected, so if there is one, it's real. Please meet with Queen Victoria on the other side of the square. We're live web streaming, so everybody will be seen as they speak, but please use the microphones, push the little button to turn yourself on and off. Voting, colleagues, can you please make sure that as members of the committee you put your hand up clearly so that we can indicate what people's view is. And then the order that we run in is that with each application we have the planning officer to give the presentation about it. We then hear from members of the public and applicants and objectors, and they have 12 minutes in favour and 12 minutes against, and then also councillors who are wanting to come to speak. We then move to the part of this where it's just members of the planning committee who have initially questions they may wish to ask about the application, and then comments where people put forward proposals about what they want to do in terms of saying yes or no to the planning application, and then we vote. And for that part of the meeting, it's just members of the planning committee, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to make decisions based on the policies, both of the council but primarily of the government, and that we do. If we come up with decisions that are at variance with that, then our chances of winning appeals are small, because all applicants have the ability to appeal to the Secretary of State to overturn a local decision. Okay, so let's just go around and introduce everybody. So we'll start with members of the committee. Judith?
Judith Smythe, Vice Chair of this committee and Councillor for St Jude Ward.
Mary Vallely, Councillor for Cosham and Wimmering.
Good morning, Chair. Chris Atwell, St Thomas Ward.
Good morning. Asghar Shah, Councillor for Cosham and Wimmering.
Hugh Mason, Councillor for St Jude Ward.
Peter Candlish, Eastning Craneswater.
Richard Adair, Councillor for Nelson Ward. Just to make you aware, Chair, item 6, Gladys Avenue, I'll be absenting myself on this one. The reasons are I gave on the first occasion this was heard. Those reasons have not changed, so I'll be absenting myself from this one item.
Thank you.
Sorry, was that due to conversations with residents?
Yeah, it's basically that. It's more the fact, just to elaborate then, I've obviously only recently come onto the committee. Prior to that, I spoke extensively to people in the area, and it could be seen that I have a prejudicial interest.
Thank you.
Matthew.
Good morning, Chair. Matthew Cordy, member for Hilsey.
Good morning. Derek North, Cosham and Wimmering.
Thank you. Councillors Adair and Candlish, could you move your microphones so that they point towards your mouth, not towards somebody else? Because otherwise it's difficult to hear you. Okay, so let's start then with our colleagues from the Planning Department. David?
Good morning, Chair. David Hodges, Head of Development Management.
Good morning, Simon Turner, one of the team leaders.
Lisa Gallagher from Democratic Services.
Thank you very much indeed. Juliet?
Good morning, Juliet Gill. I'm the Principal Planning Solicitor at Portsmouth. Just a correction on the time for people to speak. If there's just one person, it's 6 minutes. If there's 2 or more, it's 12.
Lovely, thank you. And we're joined by members of the public. You've come to speak. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Jeff Stevens, and I'm here to speak about 194 Laburnum Grove.
Thank you very much indeed.
Michael Keating, to speak about 85 Gladys Avenue.
Lovely. And Mr. Payne? Okay, we may come back to you. Going around the room, Rod?
Rod Bailey from the Milton Forum to talk about St James's with the Harbour School development and the access arrangements.
Thanks, Rod. Darren?
I'm Councillor Darren Sanders. I'm a councillor for Baffins, North Milton and South Copner, and I have called in items number 1 and number 2 on your agenda and may be speaking about them as we go along.
You are on the list.
Morning, Richard Lawrence from PJ Livesey, here to speak about item 2. I'm the applicant.
Thank you.
Morning, Steve Clark from Vistry Group, here to speak about item 1 as the applicant.
Lovely.
Rebecca Horrocks from Homes England, here to speak as landowner for item 1, St James.
I'm Oliver Farr from Applecore. I'm representing the applicants for Gladys Avenue, 194 Laburnum Grove, 59 Goldsmith Avenue and 54 Montague Road.
Lovely. And we have the owner of 59. Would you like to introduce yourself, sir? We can't hear you very much. Yep, just press it. Yeah, great. Have a go again.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, my name is John Singhlander. I'm here as the applicant for 59 Goldsmith Avenue.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh. That's very kind of you. We have people in the gallery. Hello, who are you? Lovely. And are these colleagues of yours as well? Lovely. Oh, well, we hope we give you an entertaining morning. And Councillor Hunt.
Last but not least, Councillor Hunt. So I'm here supporting residents about 85 Gladys Avenue, and with my partner in crime, Richard Adair. I'm a Nelson Ward councillor. That covers Stanshaw, Tipner, Buckland, and North End at the moment.
Thank you. And Lee, I understand you need to be off to go and do caring duties by 12:15. Is that correct?
Well, 12:30 latest. So if you wouldn't mind adjusting the running order, I'd be enormously grateful.
Okay. And you're particularly here for 85 Gladys, is that right?
Which is up the list a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, Councillor Atwell, I understand again you need to be off by 12:15. Is that correct? Do you have caring responsibilities you need to be doing? Or? Okay. All right. Okay, let's run through the. When we get to the applications, on applications 1 and 2, I'm handing over to Judith, who's going to chair as the vice chair, because I need to declare an interest, which means I shouldn't be part of those. So just let's run through the rest of the thing. So we're full house today, so there are no apologies. Colleagues, any declarations of interest from me on application 1? I've got a personal prejudicial interest because I know somebody involved in that scheme, so I'm absenting myself. And on item 2, because I made a deputation when this originally came to the committee, and this is looking to vary one of the conditions, again, I can't be part of that because I had taken a view of predetermined. So I'm not here for applications 1 and 2. Colleagues, the minutes of the meeting on the 15th of January. Colleagues, are you happy with those minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much indeed. So I'll quickly sign to make sure we're legal, or at least as close as we're going to get. And I will then hand over to Councillor Smythe. Could somebody give us a call when you're done through the first 2 applications?
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, members of the public. Nice to see you all here. We're going to start with the application for houses at St James's Hospital, Loxway Road. You have the papers, and there's quite a substantial amendment in the SMAT. Has everybody got the SMAT papers? Because it's important to take them into account as we go through. But first, I'd like to ask, I think David Hodges is going to introduce this for us. And there'll be slides coming up behind me.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, just in the interest of transparency, just like to point out that you will receive a deputation from Mr. Steve Clark in relation to his application, and just for the record, myself and Mr. Clark were colleagues a number of years ago at the Dorset Council's partnership. I can't remember how long ago, 7, 8 years ago. But just for the record, it's not an unusual scenario that former colleagues find themselves on the other side, or either sides of this scenario. But I just thought I'd point that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yes, Chair, there's an application for redevelopment at the part of the site of the St James's Hospital at Loxway Road. On the left-hand side, you'll see that the scheme forms part of a number of parcels of development taking place at the site. So, as you see from the report, consent has been granted at what's called the PJ Livesey site here. We're looking at this site here in the south east corner, which is the former Harbour School site, and you can see the aerial view of the site there. This is the footprint of the former school, which I understand is now demolished. So this is the site as is currently. With the demolition of the school largely featureless, there's a number of mature trees within the site, fairly flat. The remainder of the site is down to open areas of grass and hard surfacing. And just to highlight in this picture here, this is the listed wall listed in association with the main hospital building that you see referred to in the report. So the scheme is for the redevelopment of the site. This is the housing mix proposed. So we have a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bed units. The overwhelming majority of these are houses. There's 2 flats within the scheme. The scheme has a policy compliant affordable housing contribution, which you'll see set out there. So that we've got a mix of affordable unit sizes and types, and also in a mix of tenures, so shared ownership and affordable rent, along with market units over the remainder of the scheme. In the comments and objections, you may see in reference to the scheme being below the affordable housing contribution. The amendments to the scheme are set out in the report, and that did amend the scheme, so it took it over to the 31% and therefore is a policy compliant as an affordable housing contribution. So what's that mean for the site? So left-hand side is the proposed layout, so your north to south, so Loxway Road along the south, entrance into the site here. So 2 main vehicular routes into the site and round, a mews access in here, which is traffic calmed, you can't go through that point, laid out with properties facing onto the proposed roads and onto this new park and play area in the centre of the scheme. So middle slide gives you our housing types, so these light blue what we call fogs, so these flats over garages, just over here. The darker blue are these 2-bed terrace units. It's quite pale, but the pale colour there are these 3-bed detached units. The yellower ones are the 3-bed terrace and semis, and then the 4-bed detached are the reds. And here you can see how the affordable housing is spread out through the scheme and over the different types and tenures, so the affordable rent and the shared ownership. So just going into a little bit more detail, so that you can see the layout and some more of the detail of the layout of the properties. So we've got a mixture of in-plot and separate parking courts, here and here and here. Some of the properties you can see the parking was in the site. So that just, and then you have this mews area here, which is a traffic calm through, so it isn't in effect a wrap run through the site. Looking at those northern parcel street scenes, so this would be your view as you come from the top of the site, so the northern end looking down with your main access road access through at this point here, and then this is the northern view of the mews area, just along this part there. So next, this is some more of the street scene. So this is the north west corner with the terrace here, and these facing out onto the tree belt in that corner of the site. And these are the properties facing onto the park and the green. So this is your southern layout. So you come in from Loxway Road here. This is the road linking through. So the terrace of properties facing on to the park, and the properties here, which are set out in this curve. So we've achieved a good layout in terms of urban design. We've got properties all fronting the street with good surveillance over these areas, which you'll see in some of the later details. Parts of these are traffic calmed. And again, you can see the layout of the housing types there. In terms of your street scene, so these, we just take this through. So this is the southern view along the access into the site. So this would be the first property you would see as you came in from Loxway Road. This is the get my bearings right on this. So this is as you come in on this south plot here. So this detaches pair and there's 3 properties on here. And then finally, this is the view. And as you go into the site from along here, yes, with these angled properties going into the site there. So just remainder of the southern parcel street scene. So this is the bottom part of the Mews area here. This is the properties facing onto the green here, and this top property is this property here. So it's just facing along this view along there. These are the properties facing onto the main green area here. So you've got a series of dwellings, again all overlooking the park, and you'll see the typical of the designs proposed on this scheme. So just taking you through the house types fairly briefly. So this is what we call the fog, the flat over the garage. So you have a residential unit above, parking for that unit and other units, and then part of the units this is the way through to a parking court at the rear. These are the 2-bed terraced types, which are dotted throughout the scheme, as you see there and there and there. These are the detached 3-bed properties, so these typically sit at the end of some of the terrace units. You can see they're dotted throughout the site there. And these are our 3-bed semi-detached properties, which you can see also facing along these roads and in these locations here. And finally, this is the 4-bed detached, which are mainly groups overlooking the green and the park. So these are your material schedules here, a mix of multi-brick and red brick, grey tile, red tile. So very typical of the area and very traditional in form and appearance. Just moving on to trees on the site. So there's a number of mature trees on the site, although we don't have any Category A, very high quality trees. There are a number of Category B trees. There's a single Category B tree which is removed. That's down in this location here, which is basically on the site of this terrace. Beyond that, all of the quality Category B trees are retained. A number of trees are removed and will be replaced, as you'll see in the landscaping scheme. A little bit more detail on the proposed park in the centre. So it's also a play area as well as a park, so equipment will be placed in as well to add opportunities for play within the park. Just a bit more detail on the landscape layout. Here you can see some different surfacing that's been used. So you've got paviours for parking areas shown in there. And also different materials over these parts of the site as traffic calming measures within the Mews area here, and to delineate the parking from the circulation spaces. And this is how it works in the southern part of the site. Again, it carries through the use of different materials for the parking spaces, the paviours and the slabs. You'll see in the report there's reference to the wall on the southern boundary of the site, which is regarded as listed in association with the main hospital building. You'll see that part of the wall does get removed. Having looked at this, we're clearly satisfied this is a later addition. It's been built along the splay of the access road and is clearly evidently different from the more well-detailed and historic wall further west. So we contend that the removal of that causes no harm to the wall in terms of its setting and as a heritage asset. So it's just that part of the wall that gets removed from there. And then just last couple of slides are the 3D views of how it will look. Here you can see the differences between surfacing as you come into the residential zones of the site, between the more traditional tarmac and the park and the circulation zones. And you can see again the use of materials proposed in the scheme and very traditional forms. And then the final one is the scheme overlooking the park, and again you can see how these properties will face onto that open space area and how they will work with a much more traffic calmed and more relaxed relationship between vehicles and pedestrians within the scheme. And Chair, just to highlight a couple of things from the SMAT update. So yes, just to clarify on the housing numbers that you've seen in the presentation, the reference to the heads of terms for the habitats mitigation for Milton Common, the clarity on the wording of the condition for biodiversity net gain, and just to confirm that, that we would need to secure those heads of terms via a Section 106 agreement in this instance. But on that basis, we recommend the application for approval to you.
Thank you very much, David. We now come for the time for people who want to say something about the application, and I'm starting with objections. And who would like to go first? Rod. Welcome.
Can we start the clock? Just hang on a minute. Do you think, David, show up in the public documentation? There's a letter of the 26th of November from Hampshire Ecology. Could you show that on the screen? Because it's relevant to what I want to talk about, please.
Chair, I don't have that to hand because I didn't have any prior warning that we would need that up on screen. I can try and find it. But,
all right. Let's do the 6 minutes from now. I'll start by giving a bit of context. We'd like the actual design, the layout of the streets, superficially, that's fine. But what happened in 2017 was that we had LDA design to create a different scheme which preserved far more of the trees and hedges. And your policy, PCS 13, at the time, required that as a condition. It wanted to respect the existing trees and hedges, and we do the same in our Milton Neighbourhood Plan. That didn't come along until it was October 2022. The thing is that in 2018, that scheme that was done, you had, in terms of Category A trees, you had about 12 down the southwest corner. Well, nearly all of those are lost. Why would you want to do that? Because in 2019, you declare a climate emergency, and in 2022, and by then, don't forget, which you didn't have in 2017, you've got a cabinet for climate change and greening. Well, the climate declaration gets followed by a nature declaration, and if you're having a nature declaration, what's the point of losing so many first-class trees when you've got a policy against it? Now, we're coming along in 2025. We're sitting here trying to discuss something that doesn't need to happen. It could, but it would spoil the symmetry of the design. If you take out plots 10 and 11 and 20 to 25, you can preserve most of those trees in the southwest corner. Well, surely that's a better way of complying with PCS 13, and it's absolutely the right way to comply with the Milton Neighbourhood Plan, policy ENV2. And bear in mind that since the 12th of February last year, we're supposed to have a 10% biodiversity net gain. That's not a local policy, that's a national one. And don't forget, local policies are here for local circumstances. National ones give you the idea of how you can apply them. So look, if you've got a 52% loss in biodiversity on site, what you're saying is you've got to provide it elsewhere. There's no evidence that that actually works. But if you go with it for now, you don't even need to lose that amount of biodiversity on site. I'll read you what I wanted the committee members to see. This is what the Hants ecologist says. The layout design has made no attempt in retaining, linking and enhancing woodland parcels on site, nor recreating higher quality habitat on site. Well, why? Because the original scheme did. Furthermore, that was in the 26th of November. In December, the consultancy ecologist said, well, we've been given a biodiversity brief, but we had nothing to do with the creation of the layout. That doesn't make sense, really. You're losing. You've got. It seems to me, and even in David's presentation, you've spent a long time looking at the house designs and how you've done it. And fine, we should. It's perfectly reasonable to have a focus on the green space, but don't do it that way, or not with those houses at the south. You take them out, though, you lose 12. What the Hants ecologist has said is, well, the case officer, if the case officer's got an overriding housing priority, maybe that's acceptable, but it can't be, because to lose those 12 or 8, sorry, down the bottom. That brings it down to 50. Well, the original scheme had 55. So sorry, I don't get it. And the other thing, if we go on to parking, we've over-provided the parking. Lose some of the parking, you might be able to keep more trees. In your plan of 2012 to 2027, the aim was to make the this city, the UK's, what was the wording? Portsmouth will lead the UK in minimal car use. Well, between 2009, according to Department for Transport's data, there were 109,000 new vehicle registrations in Portsmouth, and in 2019, it's gone up to 129,000. Meanwhile, your population's gone up, according to the census, from about 205,000 or 203,000 to 208. So you've got an 18% increase in car registrations and about a 5%, maybe, 4.5%, for your population increase. So what I'm trying to get at, we want to be serious about what we want to achieve in this city, because you're saying you want to declare a climate and nature emergency. Well, you've got not enough thought here has been in what the Hants ecologists are saying, what we're saying in terms of biodiversity. And not enough thought is about you're not meeting the parking standards in the neighbourhood plan either. Okay, well, look, you haven't got it up there, but it is there, 26th of November. Take a look and have a focus, please. We don't want to count, but we shouldn't be just doing business as usual anymore. It's too late for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll pick up some of those things in questions and so forth later. Anybody else want to speak on this application? Any other objectors? Okay. Yourself.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Steve Clark, Head of Development at Vistry Southern, the applicant. Vistry Group is a 5-star national house builder and leader in the partnership housing sector. Our recent Kingston Prison development in the city, delivered in partnership with Vivid, provides a successful example of our work, providing 183 new affordable homes. We're committed to building sustainable communities and delivering modern, energy-efficient homes. Vistry has worked closely with Homes England on the St James's Hospital site for several years, and we're both pleased to be here today. In collaboration with the Council's officers, we've designed a sensitive development that will deliver 58 much-needed family homes on this brownfield site, allocated for residential development in the adopted Milton Neighbourhood Plan and Portsmouth Local Plan. We've been through a thorough design process, which has included internal design review with Homes England, pre-application engagement with Portsmouth City Council's planning and urban design officers, dialogue with the Milton Neighbourhood Plan Group, and extensive community engagement, including a public exhibition and dedicated website during the summer of 2024. Following the application publicity, we proactively addressed consultee feedback, submitting a comprehensive suite of amendments in December 2024. These included reducing parking spaces by 9, providing a car club space, increasing the Section 106 affordable housing provision from 17 to 18 units, adding 3 Sheffield bike stands within the open space, and providing further details on drainage and ecology. As your officer's report confirms, these revisions have addressed all statutory consultee objections, including those referenced in the Milton Neighbourhood Plan Group deputation a moment ago. Just as a point of clarity, as you've heard from your officers, the scheme involves the removal of 1 Category B tree and the remainder are poor quality Category C trees. No Category A trees are to be removed on the site. Vistry is committed to achieving a 10% biodiversity net gain in line with national legislation requirements. We believe the development appropriately balances habitat retention and enhancement with the need for housing on this allocated site, as outlined in the local plan. Planning practice guidance makes it clear that BNG is designed as a post-permission matter, and Vistry remain committed to ensuring that a 10% gain is achieved and accept the proposed condition in the officer's recommendation. The proposed development would provide 31% of the homes as affordable in line with policy, meaning 18 affordable homes for local people in Portsmouth. Furthermore, we intend to deliver this scheme as a 100% affordable housing development in partnership with a registered provider secured through Homes England grant funding. While this additional affordable housing won't be directly controlled through this planning decision, it will be secured through our chosen registered provider. The development will be delivered to a highly sustainable specification exceeding current building regulation requirements and utilising modern methods of construction, enabling a commitment to a quick delivery programme. Subject to planning permission, we aim to start on site in the summer of this year, 2025, and complete these much needed affordable homes by spring 2027. This site represents a rare opportunity in Portsmouth to deliver new affordable family housing. The scheme fully complies with neighbourhood, local and national planning policies, and I would therefore respectfully request that you support your officer's comprehensive recommendation and resolve to approve planning permission. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Rebecca Horrocks from Homes England to address
Thank you,
this?
Chair. Good morning, councillors. Homes England are the landowner of this part of St James Hospital, and we've entered into contract with Vistry to deliver this important housing development. As a government housing and regeneration agency, Homes England believe that affordable, quality homes in well-designed places are key to improving people's lives. Together with our partners, we have a clear mission from government to accelerate the pace of house building and regeneration across the country, as we seek to deliver homes and places people are proud to live in. This includes ambitious targets to provide affordable housing for those most in need. We all know too well the housing and affordability crisis that we are currently facing. Homes England aims to uphold standards and good practice in areas such as design quality, sustainability and building safety. We have undertaken our own design review of the proposals before you today and worked positively with Vistry to ensure this scheme scores well in its Building for a Healthy Life assessment. This is a design tool that we use to benchmark good design and drive up quality. We understand that the redevelopment of St James has had a complex planning history, but we are proud to be before you today, having worked collaboratively with Vistry to unlock this area of the site and resolve issues identified in our previous planning application in 2018. Whilst not part of today's decision-making, we continue to work up proposals to comprehensively bring forward the remainder of the site in the near future. Vistry have spoken to you already to outline the merits of this scheme, and I will not seek to repeat this here. However, we endorse their commitment to affordable housing and aligned ambitions to achieve Homes England's key priority of boosting the supply of housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now I have Councillor Darren Sanders, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you very much indeed, Judith. Firstly, a couple of declarations of interest. I've met people from Vistry previously, not least in putting together the deal that led to social housing at the Kingston prison site. I'm also the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness, and my officers are talking with Homes England about trying to make sure we can provide more council housing and more homes people can afford across the city. This is a good application in many ways. It provides family homes, which everyone knows we need. Now, not initially, but now, it is a policy compliance scheme when it comes to affordable housing, and that I think is the first time that's happened on this site and is long overdue. However, there are some areas of concern. So whilst this is broadly a very good application, I do have some areas of concern. And the first is the applicant has kindly mentioned the Milton Neighbourhood Plan. Now, the Milton Neighbourhood Plan has got parking standards. So if you like the plan, then you should stick to it. The need for excessive parking is reduced. This council has given the bus companies enough money to expand the 13 and 14 bus service into the evenings, 7 days a week. Hopefully there will be access to the U2 bus service that runs towards the Langston campus along Loxway Road as well soon. But it looks as if the scheme is 5 places above these parking standards. Is the scheme really unviable over 5 car parking spaces? I hope that we can ensure that the scheme actually meets the conditions outlined in the neighbourhood plan the applicant has mentioned. My next area of concern relates to Part 8.140 in your report. Now everybody's going to look at it. This is the part relating to the biodiversity loss. In that paragraph, it states the biodiversity loss is 52.23%. 62.23% above where we should be. As Rod has outlined, we voted for a climate emergency. Yet we need to make sure every single development, because the rules, Rachel Reeves has changed the rules recently, so that now not every single development needs to have that 10% biodiversity net gain. You just pay some money into a nature restoration fund, and it'll be interesting to see whether that will apply here as we go forwards. But we need to make sure that, biodiversity matters. This is a site that is welcomed by many people in the Milton area as a green site. And making our homes as green as possible, making our communities as green as possible, is a way of making sure that our children and our grandchildren can live in the sort of planet that they deserve. So we need to go what is beyond Amendment K in the SMAT. Amendment K talks about the provision of off-site BNG and credits, and Amendment J, bit J in it talks about a monitoring fee for on-site BNG. What I would suggest, colleagues, is what we actually have to do is make sure that every effort is done to deliver on-site biodiversity net gain, so that we don't have to rely on farmland in Winchester or Dorset to try and deal with these things. That may not happen, but I hope that we can beef up those conditions to try and make sure we can deliver biodiversity net gain on this site, not on somewhere else in Sussex or Dorset. Now, as far as the trees is concerned, which Rod has outlined, I have differing problems as far as trees on St James are concerned. In places like Whitley Row, for instance, they're concerned that trees haven't been pruned. But we also know that trees have been knocked down by NHS Property Services without any due care and attention previously. I realise, ideally, I want to see as many trees as possible kept. Ideally, I want to see all the trees replaced with ones of a suitable standard. But at the very least, the replacement of the one Category B tree to be cut down would be very, very useful. My final point relates to the public open space. There are many public open spaces in the area, particularly around Milebush Road, for instance, whereby it just seems if it's a small mugger for 5-year-olds and you're done. I don't want that to happen here. This is an area where people go. This is an area that people love. This is an area that people want to enjoy in the future as well as now. I think what we have to do is to encourage an open conversation between Vistry, the council, and local councillors for Milton to ensure that public open space is done properly here, rather than, as we've seen on so many housing estates, bunging down a bit of green and hoping it works. That is not going to work for the communities that we want to see here, the homes people want to have here, and the fact that finally, we have some homes people can afford on the St James's site. Those are my areas of concern, Judith. As I said, I think this is broadly a pretty good application, but there are some areas I hope we can beef up and deliver on our climate and nature emergency targets. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or no? Okay. I'd like to ask members then to consider questions to officers. Maybe some of the things we've heard from objectors and applicants will stimulate questions that we want to ask. Councillor Mason.
I have a number of questions, but the first one concerns the building. I noticed that the chimneys have been removed, which brings a question up on, are these homes energy efficient? What is the quality of the fenestration? How are they heated? Can we have some indication about that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's no particular requirement above and beyond the building regs in terms of energy efficiency, as I understand it in our policies. I believe it is set out in the report, and if you give me 2 seconds, I'll find a paragraph about the construction standard which will be employed, if you bear with me, Chair.
And the fenestration, will this be double or triple glazed?
Chair, I think that's a matter really for building regs rather than us at this stage. They will be dealing with the constructional integrity of the buildings, and as planning-wise, we would need a policy which is specifically requiring those standards.
Obviously, we have the BREEAM standards. They're compliant. Could I just break from the norm just for a moment and ask for an answer to that question from Vistry, please? This is about BREEAM standards and fenestration and heating and...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've actually, with the application, submitted a energy and sustainability statement which sets out exactly what the commitments are. I was just visiting it now to give you the percentage, but we will be delivering over and above current building regulation standards. The proposals are that the houses will still be heated by gas central heating, but there are solar panels on the roofs, and we exceed the SAP requirements, which is the measurement on energy efficiency through building regs, and we're exceeding the requirements by approximately an improvement of 6% over and above. So the Part L compliant CO2 emissions of 57,847 kilos per year. The scheme designed energy efficient buildings, we will be 54,384 kilos a year, so 6% below the requirement.
It's not to do with this planning application, which is a pity you're using gas when you could use sustainable electricity. Hugh, any further questions?
On a totally different matter, can I be ensured that the multi-stem trees are actually going to be trees and not just a euphemism for rather large bushes?
Chair, we're happy to take that on board. And just for confirmation, in your report from 8.156 onwards, the energy efficient measures are set out for you.
Perhaps I could just supplement that question. Could you give us a bit more details about the tree planting that's proposed, so that when we look ahead 20 years we could see category A and B trees on the site? This is uniquely, not uniquely, but it's an unusually low density development, and it should have the ability to host really quite beautiful long-term high quality landscaping.
Yes, Chair. If I could just return to the landscape plans. Why am I on that slide? Okay. Let's just skip through. So, in terms of, so this is your landscape plans. So the previous slide showed the tree retention, tree removal. The retained trees are these ones here. This is your additional planting that goes in. So as you say, there is plenty of space within the scheme to achieve additional planting, which is shown on these on this landscape plan here. And then on the southern part, again, these are the larger trees being retained, and these are the additional new planting that will be secured via the condition and added in on the scheme. If there's any further questions on that, I'll refer to the report, Chair. Thanks.
Just another question from me. The houses have their own gardens, do they? So we can be reasonably sure that I know it doesn't count against by BNG, Biodiversity Net Gain, but there would be, in fact, quite a lot of other planted areas, green permeable areas.
Yes, this is a challenge on the BNG legislation in that you can see here from this layout, all of these properties have private amenity spaces, private gardens, but they don't count towards that 10% gain. Which is a challenge for developers, and then perhaps a slightly counterintuitive in some ways, but it's about the fact that we can't do that management for 30 years of someone's private garden, which is my understanding of the reason why it wouldn't count. But yes, you can see from here each of the properties has amenity spaces attached to them, and all we're satisfied all have good usable spaces that they would use for their own private amenity as gardens, Chair.
Any other questions from members? Self?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on the Category A trees, if I may. I think we've sort of heard some conflicting information. I think Mr. Bailey mentioned that we would lose some Category A's, and I think Mr. Clark stated that we wouldn't, so I was wondering if the officer could just clarify that for us.
Yes, Chair. I'll just get you to that particular plan. So of the 26 trees to be removed, so one is a Category B tree, which is one I highlighted down here, and then the remainder are poor or low Category grade trees. Having looked at the ARB report during the deputation, there are no Category A trees recorded within this particular site.
Thank you, David.
And is the proposal to replant with better stock, with more advantageous larger trees?
Well, we would have control over that planting, and clearly we would use our own internal expertise to ensure that typically we were using native species which are appropriate for the location and also the space in which they need to grow in as well, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, we've got 58 units, which are houses and flats. If we had maximum occupancy, how many people roughly are going to be housed within this area?
I'd have to do the maths. That might take me a little while.
Quite a few people.
Can we come back to that?
Yeah. Can I do a supplementary one then? Just an observation more than anything. I mean, Councillor Hunt and I recently visited a new development behind the Odeon Cinema in North End. People had only moved in about a week before. We took the opportunity to speak to people there, and we knocked on 2 houses, and a couple answered when they had a young child, and they said they'd been housed in council temporary accommodation in Fratton. They described it as very grotty, happy. That's their words, not mine. And they were now in a lovely 3-bedroomed house. The look of delight on their faces was tangible. So I think we've got the opportunity here to make a lot of people very happy.
Thank you. Mary, you had your hand up.
I think I've got the answer. You said earlier on that there'd be 21% of affordable housing. Did you say that? 21%?
31.
31%, that's fine. Thank you.
31%, but also the possibility that there could be more under with Homes England support. I've got a question. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Can I just go to the, first of all, the road itself, the roads which are shown, are they public or private roads?
Do you mean within the development itself?
Yes.
And that's a matter for the applicant. We can't force them. All we can do is get them to build to a standard that we might, if, as the Local Highways Authority, adopt ourselves. We can't insist someone makes it an adoptable road.
Okay, then my actual question is, could I be told a little bit more about the surfaces that are being shown on the road? Because there's obviously clearly some different ones.
Yes, so public highway up here, entrance into the site. My understanding this would be tarmac. What you've got here and within the Mews area here, and if I just go up to the next one, you can see these are block paving. So they're easier to be permeable to deal with surface water, and also these parking areas are also shown as block paving, but there's a different different type to delineate those as private parking spaces from the public highway.
So the reason I was asking the question was to understand whether enough consideration had been given to the permeability, the opportunity to have the site as a drainage one. So it is difficult on the main areas of road to have anything other than tarmac, but we do have quite large areas which are associated with permeability, with block, and there are two sorts of blocks shown. Is there a difference in the permeability between the two sorts? So right in the centre, for example, there's a very clear area where the car parking spaces are shown as different to something that is on the road, and what the road seems to be is the same as on the pavements.
I don't have the answer to that, but I would speculate that there'd be very little difference between the two types of block paving in terms of their permeability.
Do you mean they would be permeable or they wouldn't be permeable? Because we're trying to work towards more permeability across all new developments.
Or the point about the block paving is that it can drain in between the bricks, in effect. Yeah, that allows you to. Whereas if you have tarmac, that's just a solid surface, it's got to run off into a drain. You can deal much more with block paving through the paving itself.
So my question was trying to explore, and it may not ultimately be something we can resolve at this point, but are we optimising the drainability, if you like, of this permeable block paving, and are we maximising the extent? Because there are some quite large areas of parking bays, for example, which it would seem to me that if their only purpose is to have a car in, then there could be some unblocked and still green segments within it. It's small, but cumulatively over time, these things make a difference.
Well, there is a drainage condition in the recommendation before you, and obviously clearly we want to ensure that the site washes its face in that regard. So that's the standard. It mustn't create an issue beyond the site, which then causes additional pressure on surface water elsewhere. So that's got to be our standard. As a inverted commas greenfield site, it is more straightforward to do. Where you have got those spaces where you can incorporate the suds within the site itself.
Just as a supplementary to that, I mean, would it be possible, this is a question, for us to have a condition that said that the permeability should be maximised and exceed standard?
We can only do up to what our standard says. Is if we've set out a standard in the local plan, that's the going above and beyond is always a risk. An applicant may choose to do that, but it's our ability to insist on it if we don't have the policy backing. So again, we want to work with our colleagues. We're the lead local flood authority because we're a unitary. They are dealing with these matters all the time. Obviously, we liaise with them in terms of the design to ensure that it's as efficient as it can be in terms of dealing with surface water, bearing in mind the problems that the city has.
Mary.
Can I just ask then, is the tarmac slightly higher and does the water run off into the bricks?
I don't think we'd be at that level of design yet.
Be a good idea if it was though, wouldn't it?
Again, through our highways design and through the lead local flood authority, we would want to ensure that the detail of that development is making sure that we don't have unintended consequences of where surface water goes through it within the site.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I've got one about the car parking. It does seem to be a bit perverse if we still do have 5 additional car parking places, as Rod Bailey pointed out. Could you explain to us whether we do still have an excess of car parking? We have generally had a policy across the city of reducing car parking where there's reasonably good sustainability through public transport, and certainly it would be perverse to exceed the requirements in the Milton Neighbourhood Plan. But I did read somewhere, I think, that had been changed. Is it in the SMAT? What's the position
yes,
with
Chair.
parking?
If you look in the report, the amendments that were secured reduced the number of parking spaces. In Para 892, you've got a side-by-side comparison of the PCC standards and the neighbourhood plan standards. So it's that box at the top of page 36. So yes, we did have an over provision of parking to begin with. We've sought to reduce that. We're at 1.5 spaces, I believe, per unit. And for the reasons that we've set out in the report, we're satisfied with that balance as an on-site provision.
So we have, it isn't there aren't 5 too many anymore.
There's if you look at the table at the top of page 36, there's a difference between the PCC standard at 98 and the Milton Neighbourhood Plan standard at 82. We're at 87, so we are 5 spaces over the standard. What we've done is taken a balanced view in relation to the nature of the development, and that parking provision we sought to bring what we've considered to be a too high provision down to get a better balance, and that's the reasoning for that is set out in that part of the report.
Thank you for clarity. That was useful clarification for us. Any more questions? If not, no.
Chair, I'm not sure if the officers want to come back on any of the comments that were made in deputations if they haven't been addressed.
I think most of them have been covered through the questions, Juliet, from memory, I think. Yeah.
I think it will be useful to pursue this one because I'm still a little bit confused. Please.
Sorry, Chair, in relation to what? I'm confused.
The parking.
So, Chair, I'm going to repeat effectively the previous advice. So it's 893. So what we've done is we set out there's a difference between the standard in PCC's adopted parking standard, which is much higher than what's on the site, and the standard in the neighbourhood plan, which is lower than what's proposed on site. So we had a initial standard that was much higher, which was much closer to PCC's parking standard. We sought to reduce that. It's much closer to the Milton neighbourhood plan standard now. It's still above neighbourhood plan standard. What we've done is taken a balanced view against the conflict between those two guidances, between those two documents, bearing in mind they've both been adopted. So we've taken a measured view whereby we're much closer to the Milton standard, except we're above it. In terms of fire spaces, is that the harm that warrants refusal of the entire scheme? Our advice would have to be no.
Is it the sort of thing that we could condition if we wanted to?
You could. Well, I'm thinking off the top of my head now. So how it's about how if members impose a condition that is different to the plan, does that go to the heart of what's in front of you in terms of the layout? Because we would not necessarily be specific about where the fire spaces would come out of the scheme. Where do the fire spaces go? One of the things just to highlight is obviously it's easier to look at these plans. With the layout that you have at the moment, you've got a mixture of on-plot and off-plot. In order to have somewhere reasonably sensible close to these properties that they're served in this parking court, they've got rear access, they can get into here. There's a couple of additional spaces here and here, but they will serve these properties here. You've got a parking court and you serve these properties here. You've got parking to the front on these properties here. So within the site, a number of the spaces are within plot, so they're actually serving these properties here and here, for example. And then further down again, if you take those 5 property spaces out, I think you would need to kind of identify which they were and whether, in terms of the layout, that still makes for a sensible location for all parking for the properties that are concerned. So we're not expecting them to park a long way away from their property without a sensible space that they can access. So without being too vague, it's a little bit difficult to do on the basis of the detailed layout plan that you've got, just to say we want to take 5 spaces out.
I mean, we're all obviously asking the same question as I am here, but I mean, theoretically, 5 car parking space would be space for a couple of decent trees or some good landscaping.
On an abstract, yes, yeah.
I was going to ask you if that's the case.
It would depend. So it would depend where the spaces came out, Chair. So just as an example, if you omitted this parking space here, I don't believe that would get you any benefit in that, because you've got a retained tree there, you've got a retained tree there. Ultimately, you need space for new trees to grow in. Within the scope of a layout, here these are on plot spaces for these properties. Potentially, yes, if you took a space out of here, you may be able to plant a larger specimen tree here, but you've already got trees proposed in here, as you can see. So the applicant has given a great deal of thought to how this layout will work, and we're certainly, as I say, with the revised scheme and the reduced parking spaces, we're not looking at acres of otherwise unusable space just given over to parking. You can see here in the parking court we've got trees on either side of this space here, so you've got a tree fitted in between these parking spaces here. So you might take 5 spaces out. Will you get a wealth of additional tree planting as a result? Probably not.
Thank you. I mean, I think the applicants are getting the feel for what we want to see in terms of green. It isn't just trees, of course. There's very much ecological planting that could be done. Can I move to comments then, please, members? Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be comfortable with the application if condition 12 could be amended to read on-site biodiversity net gain. and condition 23 to be amended so it is in line with the Milton Neighbourhood Plan for parking standards. I think that's where I'm stuck on those two things at the moment.
Just to clarify, what you're saying is that we should ask to maximise BNG on the site.
On site,
but you
to specify.
probably could never do the whole lot on site.
But the aspiration to have on site
So more.
biodiversity net gain.
I'm not sure, Juliet, how would we phrase that if we were to do that?
Chair, the legislation is drafted so that they do have to look at on-site first, and then where it's not possible to provide it on-site, you then look at off-site, and if you're not able to provide it off-site, you then go to the credits. It's set out in the legislation, so the hierarchy is in the development management procedure orders.
So, Chair, how can we ensure and feel comfortable that as much is being done on site as possible?
With BNG, there is a deemed condition which you do not write on the actual planning permission, which requires a biodiversity plan to be provided. And then there are other conditions that we put on to make sure that the plans relating to that and the provision of the on-site is provided. And then there's also a 106 agreement. And then if there's off-site, that would be secured through a 106 agreement. So it is all actually covered. They have to put the specific amounts of calculations in the biodiversity plan. So there's a metric that's used to calculate that. So it's all very specific, and different types of biodiversity get different amounts of sort of grading, I suppose you could call it. Does that help?
Thank you. Well, no, that's helpful. That's really helpful. And in regard to the parking condition?
I don't think the wording is in the report for the parking condition. Is it in the update?
Condition 23 says car parking and management plan, but if it can be changed to reflect the Milton neighbourhood plan, that's what I'm looking for.
Well, I think officers have advised that they're satisfied with the, on balance, that the extra 5 spaces are okay because it's between the level required in our Portsmouth plan and the Milton neighbourhood plan. As the officers also explained, you'd have to change the design and layout if you're going to try and find extra green space. Removing those parking spaces, I think they're of the view that it wouldn't make any difference.
Okay, so I shall have to come to my own conclusion on that. Okay.
But should we want to do so, a condition would be possible. Is that right? Because there are things like permeability and planting of other planting that can be done with without changing the design fundamentally.
I'm just going... The Milton neighbourhood plan, it says parking standards will be set at 0.75 spaces for a 1-bed unit, 1.25 spaces for 2- and 3-bed units, and 1.75 spaces for 4-bed units. So, it does provide that. It provides 5 extra above that. If you start removing spaces, you then may have with the calculation per is dependent upon the type of unit. I mean, I can't advise on that.
Looking at paragraph 893, Juliet, the allocation of parking spaces has been reduced to 87, which is below our standard. Many sites we don't have the luxury of talking like this, do we? 87, and that leaves it 5 spaces above the Milton neighbourhood standard under paragraph 893.
Chair, if it helps. I mean, I'm just looking at the neighbourhood plan, and so I'll just skip back over it. What it is it says that parking standards will be, so it's TSP2. Parking standards will be set at the levels that Juliet has just indicated. We're above that. That doesn't automatically mean that that's a harm if we're 5 spaces above it. I think that's where we're coming from. You know, we try to strike a balance between those two competing standards. If we are above that standard on a large scheme like this, 58 units, it's a small percentage above. Doing the maths, 5, 6, 7% above overall over the whole scheme. The harm from that we really don't see as being sufficient to warrant refusal of the whole scheme.
I don't think that has been proposed yet. It's, any further comment and moving towards a conclusion? Peter.
I mean, we always get tied up on the problems. There's so much here to commend as a scheme. So having gone through the pain of the discussion about whether the site should be converted at all into housing, that ship has sailed. Now we're actually looking at this scheme itself. I think there is a lot here to commend it. It does look much greener and nicer than many of the sites that we have to do. I too was a little bit disappointed that we still have gas boilers when so much else is being done, but that is a reflection about when the scheme has come up rather than, I think, where we're going to go. And I have to, declaring a small interest, I am really delighted to see the inclusion of the car club within the scheme, because ultimately this is one of the ways that we can legitimately say to people that there are opportunities for them to reduce the number of vehicles they have, particularly per home, because in all of these places we're assuming more than one per home, whereas sharing a car and then supplementing that with a car club is a really good way to go. So then we come to this knotty issue of the parking itself, and I think one of the issues here is the weight that we give to local plans. In general, everyone seems to commend the preparation of local plans, and in this instance, Milton have actually put together a local plan. A lot of discussion. I wasn't part of it, but I know there was a lot of discussion as it went through. And I therefore give quite a lot of weight to it. So I think the officers have sought to find a compromise position between the 82 and the 98, but that is more or less by doubling the two and dividing in half. Adding the two together and dividing by half. I think we should be able to make a position, and that even were it to be appealed, if we were to put a condition, I think it would be a very reasonable thing that we would have done to have done that. So I'm going to probably ultimately put a proposal forward which says that all things considered, nothing is perfect in this world. I would support this scheme, but I would like to see the retention of the lower number of car parking spaces in line with the Milton local plan.
Do I have a seconder for that? A couple, good. Before we move to a decision or hearing any other recommendations, the other thing that was raised by Councillor Sanders, for example, was having a bit more consultation on the open space to get it really well designed for all age groups. Is that so? I don't think that's something we should put in a condition here at this stage, but I do think that that's something that I would like to know that Vistry has taken into account. This is a unique part of Portsmouth in that it does have the Milton Neighbourhood Forum that has produced a plan, and I think it would be a shame to prevent further discussion of how to optimise that open space for them. Is that something we can put on as a little advisory note of some sort?
I don't think it would be a matter for either the planning conditions or the informatives, but I think it's something that the applicant will have heard and can take away.
Can we assume the applicant has heard that? Okay. Thank you. Any other...
The point which has just been made, can it be written into our report as an informative rather than as it isn't a condition, so it would be helpful if we could actually put it down in writing. Other than that, I would like to say that I like the design of the scheme. I like the design of the houses. I share my colleagues' view that it is a pity that they are gas central heated in this day and age, but this is quite lawful, and so I would certainly second his proposal.
Does everybody else like to see something informative on the consultation with the Neighbourhood Forum over the nature of that open space? It seems to me it's something, it's not part of the planning application, it's not going to be the subject of an appeal or a refusal, but I think we all do feel that it would be good to make it clear that we do think those comments were valuable and should be taken account of. Is everybody happy with that?
Chair, sorry, I should just add that the Milton Neighbourhood Plan, because that's been adopted later, that will have the precedent over the parking standards in the local plan.
Sorry, I don't think I understand what you're saying.
The Milton Neighbourhood Plan was adopted later. That becomes, neighbourhood plans become part of the adopted plan. So if there is any difference between the local plan that existed before and the neighbourhood plan would take precedent. I think David would like to chip in.
Yes, that's in 893 as the report, Chair. Can I, just before going to the vote, can I just be clear on Councillor Cavendish's proposed extra condition? Is it to reduce the number of parking spaces in the development to 82?
Yes, because I think that is a simple and clear condition that we can put. And I think that we should not, in this meeting, be trying to ascertain how that is achieved. I mean, I looked at, I was going to ask a question about how you got into some of the car parking spaces, because they seem to be places where one car had to follow another, which presumes a two-car house. So I think there might be some ways to do it, and I've shown my love for the car club as an idea, as another countervailing way of delivering it, but that I don't think we can put down as a condition. So as a simple condition, I think stating to achieve the 82 in line with the more recently adopted Milton Neighbourhood Plan would be the basis of my proposal.
Thank you, Chair. And just confirming, the informative note would be about to consult with the Neighbourhood Forum over design of the play area, or the design of the open space widened, or just the play area?
The play area is the important thing, because that needs to be made suitable and attractive for everybody, taking the point that Councillor Sanders made. You know, taking into account my particular passion is making sure some of the play equipment has shelter from trees from the hot sun that we're experiencing. But they're all part of good practice now.
Chair, in terms of the parking standards, the Milton Neighbourhood Plan doesn't say anything about going over or below. So I'm just a bit concerned that, you know, the development has been designed and the layout is as per the plan, and you're asking them to amend the layout, which may not result in anything better.
I don't think
I'd have to defer to the planning officer to comment on the design side of things.
I would like to comment from the chair that I don't think we are doing that, because, you know, what's nicer than a car park shaped piece of planting of things that are bee friendly, and actual more planting would be perfectly acceptable, and the landscape, the layout wouldn't need to change at all, and permeable areas. So I'm not sure.
Chair, if I may?
Yep.
So I think my proposal is that we add a condition that makes it at 82 rather than whatever. I recognise that may or may not be acceptable to someone on appeal, because I don't know the law. You know, that is a judgment that someone else would have to make, but that is what we are clearly proposing as a condition, I think. And it's since given that there is a conflict between two plans, indeed one of them is more recent than the other, it doesn't seem like an unreasonable thing to be doing. So on many occasions I am forced to go along and support proposals which I really don't like because the law traps me in this place. Here, I worry about sticking the local taxpayer with a failed appeal. Here I don't feel that I'm in that position because I think it's a reasonable thing that we are conditioning.
I think with your permission, members, we'll go ahead with a vote on that amended approval of this, these plans in accordance with the conditions laid down here, together with that additional condition of limiting the car parking spaces to 82.
Chair, I don't think it's a reasonable condition. I think if you want to put it on as an informative, saying could they revisit and see if they could reduce it to 82, I think that would be much more reasonable.
Given that what we want could be achieved by planting up a few of the parking spaces that we consider, and they could be planted up with things that were bio-friendly and potentially, if it was two together, add to biodiversity net gain. I don't think that, well, would you like to comment, David?
So at some point, as a personal experience through a legal case, if members want to attach a condition which means the plan is different to what's shown on the plan, it's got to be capable of being accommodated within the plan without fundamentally rechanging it. I think in this case, potentially we can deal with that because what you're intending to do is, in effect, keep the dwellings all in the places that they are, but indicate that certain of the spaces could be removed to be replaced by a tree or planting. So just if, while we've been discussing sort of between ourselves about the prospects of that, just a wording that might help. So notwithstanding the plans as approved, the layout of the scheme shall be amended to ensure that no more than 82 parking spaces are provided, and the amended scheme should be submitted for the approval of the council prior to the formal layout of those spaces for the reasons of the Milton Neighbourhood Plan. Does that sound a reasonable way forward?
Yes, thank you very much. Is everybody else happy with that? Peter?
I am actually. I'm happy with that because that avoided saying like planting trees, because it may not be. If I was to be given a pen and to find the 5 spaces, I might do it in a way that wouldn't enable a tree to be planted in its place, but it could be green. So I think we keep it simple and we see that where that takes us.
Yes, thank you both for that. Are there any alternative recommendations? In which case, I'll move to a vote to agree this, subject to the conditions here and subject to the additional condition that David has just read out about reducing car parking spaces. All of those in favour, please raise your hands.
That's unanimous. Planning permission is granted.
Thank you all very much. We're now going to move to the next application, which is related in the terms of the area, but a very different sort of application. It's on page agenda item 7. We have now the important thing on this one is that we have a SMAT note on it that I think is extremely helpful to us. And I'd like to draw your attention to that and make sure you've read it before we have the debate. This is on page 5 of the supplementary matters, and it adds some conditions to the latest revision of the CEMP, which do restrict the use of the new route that's proposed a lot. So read that while we're having the introduction to this application, and note that it does, in my mind, change the situation that we face in making a decision. So, agenda item 5, David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so just for clarity, this is a site already has planning permission. A condition was attached to that planning permission about a construction environmental management plan, or a SEMP for short, which is how the developer will manage dealing with things like deliveries, parking, constructors parking, all those working hours, all those kinds of issues whilst the development's taking place. So your red line plan is on the screen there, so that's the former St James's Hospital, and the aerial photos also show you the nature of the site. So it's a very straightforward issue. We have already agreed through this construction plan a route in and a route out for heavy goods vehicles. So the route in is on the left, which goes down the Eastern Road, Milton Road, Loxway Road, and then in from the south. And then the exit for vehicles is to go out through here onto and then up to the Eastern Road via this much shorter route. Via Warren Road, sorry, that's what I meant to say. So the proposed change is simply to use the Warren Road route for in and out. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. So, not least, it's a shorter route. It means that vehicles will be coming down the Eastern Road, dual carriageway for the majority of it, till you get to a good companion pub, traffic lights here. Then they take a left, they go along Warren Road. There's quite a wide junction here, where opposite the primary school, and then a much shorter route into the site here, and that would be the way in and out. As part of the development, the existing HGV movements have the ability to park up at this truck stop on Walton Road, where they can call ahead and make sure that they're ready for the deliveries to come down, so that they are prepared. And as you'll see from the SMAT, they've committed to no more than 2 HGV movements per day, which is very low, unless there are exceptional circumstances. If in the event that they did need on a particular day to do an additional run-in, they would simply use the approved route via Loxway Road. There are a number of also beneficial, as well as being a shorter route. It passes fewer residential properties to get in via this way and back out that way. As you'll see, the junctions have the capability. There is an industrial estate along Warren Road, Warren Avenue, I should say, which already exists, so it's just along here. So it's already taking heavy traffic, using that existing site over which we have no control. So the roads are adequate for dealing with those heavy good vehicles, because actually there's an industrial estate up to there. Just to highlight the additional bits that have been added into the construction plan from the SMAT, just to clarify, the applicant is seeking to limit the impacts as much as possible for the development of the site, and we are looking at no more than 2 HGV movements per day. On that basis, Chair, we're very satisfied that that's an acceptable amendment to the construction management plan and is a reasonable compromise, and we're happy to recommend it for approval to you.
Thank you very much, David. Do we have any objections or any... we do have Rob Bailey again, please. Richard Lawrence and Darren Sanders.
Okay. Well, thanks for the changes. That helps. What we wanted to do was to have a one-way system so that 2 large vehicles don't have to go down Moorings Way in opposite directions. I guess you're not able to put up my objection with the photographs of a number 13 bus swinging around from the Eastern Road into Moorings Way. But if you do, you'll wonder why a large HGV articulated vehicle will manage that turn. You had in your local plan background information a statement or an evaluation of highway capacity, and in 2015 you're already at capacity above. You're supposed to have 90% of the operating capacity of a junction, otherwise it's at capacity. Well, you were on 92%. Well, we haven't got any better. You see, in rush hour, and I think this is the key, and I'm pleased that we've changed, you've got to avoid the school times. That will help, but we still haven't got around the situation where you want a large vehicle to swing left from Eastern Road into Moorings Way, and that means that there's the way the highway is configured, that the first vehicle has to reverse on the other side of the road. It has to reverse when a bus swings round sometimes. Well, I don't know, 40-ton HGV articulated, it's going to need a lot more space than a number 13 bus. There's that bit. And as you go along the road, if people are parked there, you can't get two HGVs to pass one another. There's not enough space for them to get into. So by having the one-way system, it avoided all that risk. So if we may be looking, can we put those conditions back up again? Because we need to be able to monitor this. If we're going to accept the 2 per day, we can't have a conflict with them going in the other direction, can we? Otherwise, the problem's still there. And that's what the Milton Forum wants to avoid. So that's fine.
We'll pick that up over questions. I mean...
You see where I'm coming from? If we can do that, I think the scheme might work. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rod. Darren? Oh, yes, I'll take you first. Richard Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. If I could ask for the presentation, page 3, to be put on the screen, if that's okay. It's easier to visualise it. So, my name is Richard Lawrence. I'm the in-house architect at the PJ Livesey Group, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. The submitted KEMP, is Construction Environmental Management Plan, very catchy title, so I'm going to restrict it and call it KEMP from here on. It's largely unchanged from that has already been approved. So if we could refer to the previous 2 pages, I think, back. Perfect, thank you. Planning permission is being sought to amend the site entrance route for construction vehicles from Loxway Road on the left there to the Edenbridge Road access, and that's for access arrangements. The documents that were submitted as part of application 2301401 has been approved previously. So what we're offering or asking to do is enter in via the Edenbridge Road approach for 2 vehicles only. After that, the 3rd vehicle would use the current arrangement on the left-hand side there via Loxway Road. The committee report recommends approval for this condition application, and this reflects the robust work that we have done. While I won't repeat all the detailed findings in that report, I would like to emphasise a few key points. 7.10 of the committee report states the documentation submitted shows that multiple options have been considered, and that's what we're looking at now. 7.11, Loxway Road route does in fact increase the mileage, it does increase the congestion, and tall HGVs pose a threat to, or pose a potential risk to the existing tree canopies on the south of the application site. Edenbridge Road is not without its challenges. However, it is the shortest and the least congested route. This is highlighted by 7.6 of the committee report, which states that the proposed route change would reduce the extent of local highways impacted by construction vehicles and thereby reduce the number of residential dwellings affected. Feedback from local interest groups, the Milton Neighbourhood Forum, we've heard those concerns, and they've been integrated into this latest revision of Revision E. This is evidenced by 7.5 of the committee report, which states construction traffic would be prohibited during school drop-off and pick-up periods. And again, we are asking to approve Revision E of the KEMP, which offers that limitation, that caveat that we ourselves are confident and comfortable with, where no more than 2 HGV vehicles will enter the development via Warren Avenue per day, other than in exceptional circumstances. If a third HGV needs to access the development on the same day, it must use the Loxway Road route. HGVs will continue to exit via Warren Avenue in accordance with the approved KEMP application number 230141. We acknowledge that the Milton Neighbourhood Forum have concerns, and we greatly appreciate the valuable local insight provided. Their input prompted us to re-review our strategy to ensure that it is appropriate. We acknowledge that they are correct on road widths. At 8 metres, Loxway Road is indeed wider than the 7 metres of Warren Avenue. However, parked vehicles reduce the clear width on both of these roads down to 5 metres. It's worth mentioning that the Portsmouth City Council transport officers have raised no objection, and neither have their partners Colas. They have stated the configuration of the local streets does not encourage anything other than slow and careful driving, and Portsmouth City Council transport officers are satisfied that there would be adequate safety with the traffic flows generated. This addresses any concerns regarding HGV manoeuvrability on Moorings Way. In other words, HGV drivers for this construction development, they would do the same as the good bus drivers of the number 13 bus. They would drive carefully and appropriately for the road conditions. The construction traffic at St James's Hospital development will inevitably cause some temporary inconvenience. We're trying to limit this impact as much as possible, and we are very conscious that the long-term benefits far outweigh this temporary inconvenience. We are developing a legacy project enhancing both the site and the wider community, and this is achieved by restoring the beautiful listed buildings for sustainable new use, offering much needed homes in an area with limited development opportunity, creating landscape public open space on a site which was previously private. That is to be maintenance funded by the future residents of the development. We're delivering cycle routes connecting with Route 601. We're exploring alternative uses for the historic chapel, and we're providing 106 contributions to the Milton Common and Nutrient credits. These are just a few of the benefits of the proposed development, which requires appropriate construction access. Members can be confident that approving this discharge of condition application will not set a precedent. Each site is obviously unique. However, refusing or deferring it risks delaying this vital and complex project. And in closing, with over 45 years of experience in converting historic assets, the PJ Livesey Group is uniquely qualified to bring this site back to life. I urge you to approve this application of KEMP Revision E to allow us to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Darren, Councillor Sanders, would you like to...
Thanks, Judith. I brought this here for 2 reasons. Removing secrecy and experience of what happens when you do things in the dark. Moneyfields Football Stadium is being rebuilt as the John Jenkins Stadium. Although the current scheme is a major boost for our city's young people, I opposed the original version of this development, as did many of my residents. And one of the key reasons was the increased traffic it will cause on local roads. Well, the application got through. But one of the mitigations committee recommended at the time was to open a nearby bus lane to construction traffic. That seems sensible. It enabled traffic to have 2 ways of getting in, so minimising the impact on local roads. However, the then developer, not Pompion the Community Net, which is the developer now, the then developer, and planners decided, without consulting local councillors or local people, not to do that. The consequence of that has been an already crowded one-way system, especially in Folkestone Road, becoming worse. Weirdly, some people now blame me and my colleagues for this increase.
Could we restrict this to comments on this application, please? I mean, I do think it's important that we look at this application on its own merits.
I was merely offering some logic behind my rationale. But I'm happy to move to the bit that does include this on the specific application, because it was my anger at that approach was such that when I heard that something similar was happening at St James's, it was important to stop that, or at very least bring that decision-making into the open. Now, when we talk with people in Edenbridge and nearby roads, they already complain about too much van parking and traffic. So the idea that doubling the number of vehicles currently leaving the Edenbridge Road entrance of this site will have no impact is laughable. It clearly comes from people who've never been down that road or travelled on that part of the road network. That is why what has been suggested goes against Neighbourhood Plan TSP1 as well as common sense. So the approach of the residents and us as local councillors is not to have any more vehicles using Edenbridge Road than exists now. That is the deal PJ Livesey, the Milton Forum, and local councillors agreed last year, and where I think, from Richard's deputation, PJ Livesey is continuing to come from now. So as a reasonable person, and talking from people in PJ Livesey, I think that we have something that will satisfy local people whilst giving the construction, the applicants some flexibility. And it expands Revision E, outlined in the SMAT, what Richard has been talking about. The first thing I would suggest would be to add a new sentence to the applicant's Revision E, which is the total number of vehicles entering from Warren Avenue will be no more than exists currently. I think that's the logic of what Richard is saying, and he's outlining and expanding that as far as the HGV restrictions are concerned, which is something I support. As I think Richard and his construction people have found out, HGVs and Edenbridge Road is a match made in hell, so the fewer roads that go down there, the better. The third thing doesn't actually require any changes to the Kemp at all. It's to get PJ Livesey to work with the council and local councillors outside of this meeting on what exceptional circumstances actually means. Now, I've been told this is road closures and similar and things like that, and that's perfectly understandable, and that's fine. But if they could work with us, and we will work with PJ Livesey, to make sure that everybody knows what those exceptions are and local people are informed of what those exceptions are, then I think we will have fewer problems. Finally, and again, this can be done outside of this meeting, is for PJ Livesey to work with the planning team, local councillors and the Milton Forum to just further specify what the peak school run times to be avoided are as per Revision E. Again, it doesn't need to change the Kemp at all, but it is something that we can do because it will help, I think, both the people coming in and out of the site from not running into the children, and it will make people feel a bit safer. So, colleagues, I've seen the cost of secrecy. It's clogged roads, it's pollution, it's damage, and it's distrust among local people, something that exists here as well as in other places in my ward. That's painful to watch. It's hard to handle. I don't want it to happen here. I welcome the Kemp that has been put forward this morning. I hope my small factual additions will make that better. But you have a chance to stop that here and now. I'm confident PJ Livesey will accept my suggestions, and we can continue to try and work together to make sure this development has as little impact as possible whilst delivering what this committee has agreed. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any questions from members? Hugh.
Quote from Mr. Lawrence: Edenbridge Road is not without its challenges. I would like to investigate a little further the quality of Edenbridge Road. What is its width? Can heavy vehicles get easily around the roundabout which is at the southern end, towards the southern end of Edenbridge Road? And is the road surface or the road construction sufficiently robust to be able to take heavy goods vehicles carrying a large amount of weight without seriously damaging the road?
Thank you, Chair. I deliberately hadn't gone through this because there's a lot of technical detail, but the applicant has provided what's called a swept path analysis, which shows how all of the roads are entirely adequate for the proposed route in, and of course they would be because we've already agreed that they are acceptable for a route out. But in effect, so a swept path analysis is just basically showing how you can get a HGV or a larger vehicle round all these junctions we fully accept there are issues where there are parked cars within the highway, there are parked cars on any route. We are dealing with an urban area with a lot of on-street parking, and it is inevitable there is some disruption and potential conflict when we're building and we need to do deliveries, and this will apply all across the city. So what we have tried to do, what the applicant has tried to do, is show how actually where these junctions are, they are available and adequate for HGVs to use. I go back to the point made in the presentation that there's an industrial estate along Warren Avenue which would be taking commercial vehicles as well. But effectively all the way through they've shown that we can get the vehicles in and out satisfactorily with the road widths that we've got. The Highways Authority have given their agreement to this and we don't have any evidence that it's an inadequate route for the proposed use, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Another question? Yes.
And the quality of the road construction, Edenbridge Road, because it is just a small road in a residential area, this will take the weight of these heavy goods vehicles, which was my part of my question.
Yes, Chair. We have investigated that after the briefing yesterday, and yes, Highways have confirmed they're satisfied with the road services are adequate for HGVs for the reasons already given. Thank you.
Picking up on Mr. Bailey's comments about the trucks turning left into Moorings Way when there's traffic being stopped by the traffic lights there, could you just confirm that this has been taken into consideration, or have the measurements just been taken on the road width for it being empty as opposed to having stationary traffic at the lights?
Yeah, Chair, I believe referring to this junction here at the Good Companion. So yes, the Highways Authority have considered this and they're content with it as a solution for access into the site. So in these scenarios where we've got this technical data, we will pass it over to the relevant officers internally and take their views. And so your highways officers are content with this arrangement as shown here. So left-hand side is going in, so you're coming down the Eastern Road, turning left, and then this is going back out of the site, going out of the city.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, we'll move on to comments. I'm very happy from the chair, given that it's only going to be just over 2 years that this is happening, and it's two a day, and avoiding peak hours and the school hours, to recommend that we approve this application. Do I have a seconder? Any alternative proposals? Then I would like to move. Peter.
Well, Chair, two things. Firstly, I'm the Cabinet Member for Transport, so we've got rather technical on this now, and I'm wondering whether I should be declaring an interest. Juliet is not looking at me severely, so I'm hopeful that I can continue. And the second thing is just a comment, is in addition to the peak run time, the issue about the bus that was referenced, the bus runs 1 time per hour, and it's now quite possible to identify where the bus is. So I think with some experience and some thought from the developer, that it will be possible for them to miss out on that conflict at least most of the time. Nothing will ever be perfect, because if there's a transport issue between the stop-off point and that point, it will still come up. And the second comment would be, if we already have trucks going the other way, then I suspect there will occasionally be issues, but it must be that it is possible to do. So I'm minded to accept.
Thank you very much. If there are no other alternative proposals, can we move to a vote to approve this application? Anybody against? And I believe there are no abstentions. Anybody abstaining? Good. Okay. Thank you all very much. We've got to call Councillor Vernon Jackson back. I'm going to propose that if anybody wants to go to have a comfort break for just 5 minutes, this would be a good time to do it. And see you all back here at 25 past. Thank you all very much.
Matthew, is Derek on his way? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's crack on. We're in session again. Let's get on and get things moving. So we're at 85 Gladys Avenue, colleagues. David, are you doing this? Or
Simon is.
Simon,
I'm
thanks.
driving the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Chairman. We have an application at 85 Gladys Avenue for a change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to an 8-bed, 8-person house in multiple occupation. 8 of the 10 of the members here were at the committee in November when this matter was deferred around the matter of investigating some more properties as to their use. I'll come back to that in a moment. Just to make sure I don't forget the Supplementary Matters report, the SMAT, an entry's crept in here that I don't recognise. I think it's an error. It says we need an amended recommendation. We do actually have an amended resolution because of the non-determination appeal. So an appeal against non-determination has been submitted by the applicant. Depending on the outcome of today's meeting, if the application is favourable to the members, the resolution reads that had the applicant not submitted an appeal against non-determination and the local planning authority still had the ability to determine the application, it would have granted planning permission. What may happen if it's approved, if the applicant might withdraw the appeal and the inspectorate might allow us to go ahead and issue the decision rather than going through a pointless appeal. So we'll see where we get to with that depending on today. Because a couple of the members here today weren't at the last meeting, and in any event, we'll just run you quickly through the main points of the application as per last time. To make clear, there have been no changes in the plans, but nevertheless, I shall take you through them. So, Gladys Avenue up in the north of the city in Nelson Ward. This is an application that's come to the Planning Committee because of the number of objections. Next slide, thank you. So it's a terrace property, the yellow painted one there. You can notice on its left-hand side there's a doorway. That is the alleyway that takes you through to the path behind, the shared path. If we go back one slide, please, David. You can make out on the left-hand side along the southern boundary is the alleyway that goes through the building and leads up to the back of the property and other properties. In the report back in front of you, just reminded you that there was a question mark around, or a question about the safety of that alleyway. The applicant has said they would be perfectly happy to install a shared lock, either a PIN number, a PIN or a code or a key for that alleyway. The report back makes it clear that the planning authority shouldn't require that because the alleyway exists and is already used and there's no material change in circumstances for its use. So that's just a kind offer of the applicant. In terms of the 50-metre radius, I'll come back to this in due course as well, but as per last time, we can see 3 existing HMOs with the purple diamonds, one of them immediately to the north of the application site. 3 out of 65 properties was 4.6%, bearing in mind the 10% threshold in our guidance. If this application were approved, it would take it to 4 out of the 65, which is 6.15%, so still below your maximum indicative threshold, indicating that the community would remain as a mixed and balanced community in accordance with policy. I'll come back to the percentages locally in a moment. The next slide, please. Thank you, David. So here's the layout of the existing house, a fairly wide property with the main 2 rooms downstairs and then the rear wing with the kitchen, and upstairs 3 good-sized bedrooms and a bathroom. That will be converted with a permitted development roof extension on the left-hand side to gain 2 rooms into the roof. On the left-hand side, where room 8 is labelled, that is a prior approval rear extension that's already been secured by the applicant, and then a smaller extension to the kitchen living room on the left-hand side between 7 and 8 is permitted development. So last time we took you through the room sizes. All of the rooms comply with respect to 8 individuals in the property. The bedroom sizes, the ensuite and so on provisions, and the community space and living space all complies with your standards. So that was looked at last time. You can see there on the left-hand side top the rear roof permitted development extension, and on the bottom left you can see the prior approval rear extension for the communal space, and then the further bedroom. So returning, and thank you, David, just a couple of 3 photographs there show the front of the property, the rear garden and the alleyway. So that's looking from the rear towards the street. So the tunnel is down through there, and that's number 85 with the light-coloured render. So to take you back to the reason the application was deferred was because of a resident had referred to some property at the rear, which would mean Nelson Avenue to the west there, running north-south, saying whether or not there was an HMO there. And members were concerned to make sure that they had 100% accurate figures. Upon questioning, the person couldn't remember or wasn't sure which property they were referring to, so we didn't get very far there. But we visited 7 of the properties, 26 to 38 Nelson Avenue, to check on them all. There were no answers to officers calling at the door. There were no answers to our letters. Officers looked at their houses as best you can tell to try and see if there were any signs of multiple occupation, like bigger or more bins, or downstairs room converted to a bedroom, for example. They couldn't see such signs. So in conclusion of all those matters, as well as the lack of any records of licensing or council tax or planning, we conclude still that those properties that members asked us to look at are not in HMO use. Concurrently, after the committee, one of the neighbours wrote in and referred us to number 80 Gladys Avenue. So we have also looked at that, and that is set out in the report as well. So we've been corresponding with the owner for some time to try and make sure we had complete and accurate information, which is why it's taken a little while to come back to committee. In a nutshell, that property does appear to be currently used as an unlawful HMO because of the non-family members living together as a household. But because it's not lawful, we wouldn't count it in the 10% calculations. We have nevertheless set out all those figures for you. And lastly, Councillor Hunt just this morning has asked us again, residents are still referring to number 80, which I've just described to you. So we agree with them that it is indeed an HMO, albeit unlawful. And they've also asked about numbers 38 and 58 Gladys Avenue, both of which are outside the 50-metre radius. So they're not counted in the policy calculations, the guidance calculations. So we are left with the same situation as we had last time, which is currently 3 HMOs within the 50-metre radius. If approved, this would be the 4th, which would be 6.15% below your maximum threshold of 10%. So we are assured that our recommendation can stand and that policy would be complied with were the application to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Okay, can we move on to people coming to speak on this issue? I've got Mr. Keating and Mr. Farr. Mr. Payne, are you just going to watch? Yeah, okay. And then Councillor Hunt, I think, who's not on the list, and we need to find out why you keep not being on the list when you've emailed in, so to see if we can improve.
Isn't it?
It is. I worry that Democratic Services have got it in for you, Lee. But we need to see if we can find a way of making this work.
The point is that I am here.
You are indeed. So
I think I'm here.
Let's just do it in the right order, Lee. So, Mr. Keating, thank you very much indeed for coming, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'm a bit concerned that I've just heard that 80 Gladys Avenue is not being counted. That's absolutely ridiculous. That is it's a HMO. It doesn't matter what you say, whether it's illegal or not, it's a HMO and it's right opposite number 85. And it does concern me because I spoke to Eleanor Bailey, who is the enforcing officer, and she says she's still making inquiries on it. And I'm assuming that they've made those inquiries and that they found out that it is illegal. Why it's not included, I do not know. The other concern I've got is 101 Gladys Avenue. Now, the rules say that it's a 50-metre radius. Now, 101 Gladys Avenue is a approved HMO, which is in the process of being built at the moment. That also falls within the 50-metre radius. I've looked at the legislation and the rules, and there's nothing at all that says that just because half of it's in there, it doesn't count. I can't see any legislation at all. It's within the rules. It says it's 50 metres. It's within the 50-metre radius, and it's a HMO. Why that is not being counted, I do not understand. My main point really is security. I've resided at 83 Gladys Avenue now for past 40 years. It's a covered alleyway. It divides the two houses, 85 and 83. Initially, the alleyway was open. When I first went there, people used to come in and urinate in it, walk up it and walk around it. And I questioned this because I'm an ex-police officer and I happened to spend 10 years as a police officer in Portsmouth. And I questioned why they were there. And I knew why they were there, because they were looking at access to the rear of the premises. And it's approximately, as you've seen on the drawing, it's 8 premises north of the alleyway that leads to the back. And that also gives access to Nelson Avenue, the rear gardens of Nelson Avenue. As a result of that, I installed the door with a lock on it. As I say, I've policed this city for 10 years, and I've attended many, many burglaries. Almost the difference between what they do now and what we did was, nowadays they may turn up at the burglary 3 or 4 days after. We turned up almost immediately, and we've experienced the anguish and absolute devastation of the people that have been burgled. And it wasn't just the property that was stolen, it was the fact that these people had invaded their premises. And that is probably the main thing. They've invaded their premises. And as most burglaries occur at the rear of the premises, I'm sure that putting my gate, that door in that alleyway, prevented access. Just as a matter of interest, a colleague of mine's daughter moved into Nelson Avenue. She'd been there 2 days, and someone went down the alleyway and stole her bags from the back garden. That's just a classic. Just for interest, last year there was 2001 thefts from back gardens, and there was 2.1 burglaries for every 1,000 people, and they recorded 210,000 people in Portsmouth. So there's 2.1 burglaries for every 1,000 people. I'll let you work that one out. And those are the ones that have been actually reported. A lot of burglaries are not reported. One of the reasons is police attendance. If there's property stolen, normally all they're after at the end of the day is they'll give them a crime number for insurance purposes. One of my concerns, firstly, is the builders. We've had in our Gladys Avenue, within 100 metres of ours, we've had actually 3 HMOs built all at once. The last one is still in the process, and that's 101. The amount of mess, etc., I won't go into, but one of the things about it is security. Unlike the others, the builders had to actually enter through the front door of the premises. On mine, I'm sure they're going to use that rear alley, the alleyway. Yeah. How they're going to get their mechanical gear in there, I do not know, because it's not that wide. And I'm hoping that they don't try and remove the door, because if they do, I will not be particularly happy about that. My second problem is once the occupiers come in, let's face it, they're living in a bedsit. They've got very little property. Security is not on their mind at all. Access through that rear alleyway, for whatever reason they want to use it, and I've got no objection to that because they're entitled to use it, yeah, concerns me because will they lock that door after them? And the agents have turned round and said, yeah, we'll put a super duper lock on it. They won't put any super duper lock on it because if you don't lock the door, it ain't going to work. I've got a Yale key in there at the moment, and that's sufficient. I don't think they should put any padlock or anything where someone can just have a number and go in.
Mr. Keating, you haven't got much time left.
No, that's all right. Lastly, Amanda Martin, our MP, is she's taking it on board. And just for interest, 2018 to 2019, there were 3,920 HMOs in Portsmouth. In 23-24, that's gone up to 6,000. I've just heard two comments there, with two applications for building houses. We're building houses, and yet we're turning perfectly good houses into HMOs. I just can't understand that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Farr.
Thank you. I'll get my normal intro out of the way as I've got a few today. I'm the planning advisor for Applecore. We assist clients with architectural design needs and handle the planning processes. You can probably tell by looking at me, I'm not making vast amounts of money as maybe suggested by a few people. And Applecore are not limited to HMOs. We work with a lot of developers on a lot of different projects. So as well as all our designs always being buildable, our designs are always compliant with planning, building control and licensing requirements. We don't design or otherwise endorse something that isn't. All the applications are submitted with the consideration that they should comply with policies PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan, as well as the HMO SPD. So with this application, I don't need to elaborate too much on the design elements. My colleague was here in November to represent the applicant, and the planning officer's already gone through the design. So as a quick summary, all the bedrooms exceed 10 square metres, additional light in the communal space, side access, high-spec finish, and so on. Just want to get to the point about the security. It's the applicant that says they're willing to take measures on the side gate. I will quite happily ask the applicant to speak to you about what measures you would prefer and how that's going to be maintained, but he's absolutely on board with that. Going back to the application, when you previously discussed the application, the focus seemed to be on the potential illegal HMOs. We don't feel that this should have resulted in the applicant being penalised for following the correct processes. But hopefully it doesn't seem that the planning officers have actually alleviated this concern with the discussion about number 80. I read in the officer's report that the owner of number 80 said they were living as a community. Class C3 falls into three categories, A, B and C. B and C doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be related. It means they need to be living as a household. So it's a tricky one, but a community could be covered by category C. Anyway, we expected the application to be back with you at the next committee, which was 3 weeks after the one it was deferred at. We're now 3 months down the line almost. This uncertainty is why the applicant decided to enter the appeal for non-determination. It was all about time. We didn't know how long it was going to take for the investigation to conclude. We could have ended up straightforward refusal based on those findings, and then we'd have to commence the appeal process much later down the line. It tends to take about 6 months. What we didn't anticipate was the inspector would start the appeal as quickly as they did. They seem to have sped up a little bit lately. So although I've had to do a few hours work to put the appeal together for the applicant, if the application is approved today, I will have a chat with the inspector and see if a withdrawal is possible to save any further work, on the assumption that the planning department will issue the decision notice within a decent timescale. We've already done the legal agreement for the nitrates. That was done well just before the previous committee, so I don't see any other reasons for it to be held up. I've already spoken about the side access, so just to conclude, I hope today's discussion is about the application before you, because the last discussion was more about the unlawful HMOs than the actual application, although one councillor did point out that it was a good application, and I hope there's not going to be any further delays to the consideration of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. We've been out and spoken to every person in the area that was in over a number of days, and I can't tell you the concern that the sudden appearance of these 3 or 4 conversions have caused in this neighbourhood. It has really upset the rhythm and the rhyme of people living there. One thing I think that does get missed is that when we sit down here in this forum, it kind of drills down to semantics and words and conditions and so on. And this is so far removed from what our residents, the people that we represent, want. So the other thing I would say is that the stand that you took last time has proved to be beneficial. You have heard the officers describe about an unauthorised HMO at 80. The one thing that struck me this morning listening to the debate and the representation so far is I think that we need a policy change, and I think we need to start saying that if unauthorised HMOs are discovered within a 50-metre radius, or an HMO is coming down the track, these should be at least considered when you're making your decision. Because if suddenly 2 or 3 unauthorised ones show up within this 50-metre radius, that takes us over 10%. And that is a breach of our contract that we are selling to people out on the streets and in their homes, that we will stick to 10%. So if number 80, and this is why I can address Mr. Farr's point, if number 80 does come in, that takes it up even more. And if there are others, as described by Mr. Keating, and there are some that we will be sending to the officers as well, which are outside of this area, you start to end up with a position that within this 50-metre radius, there may be 12 or 14%, and that's simply not fair. That is wrong. So this report, I think, and this stand that you took last time has teased that out a lot. The other thing I want to say that there are, if you look at the register today, the HMO register, 38 and 58, which I wrote in about this morning, which residents have brought to our attention, if you look on the HMO database, they are licensed as HMOs, but according to the HMO database, they don't have planning permission. That just may be catch up, I have no idea. But there are quite a few like that around. And it clouds the water, I think. We don't really know exactly what is what. And if we are to make this industry stand up, because it's going to continue, residents must be sure that you are making the right decisions here. And today I'm not convinced, because others are being pointed out. And I would hate to think that you would be making a decision about an HMO today when there are 2 or 3 more in the area that would take it over the 10%, and that is just not fair to residents. On the actual application itself, I've always made very clear that the standard of HMOs has been driven up by this committee and has been driven up by the licensing regime. But these aren't normal in residential streets. We're talking about an 8-bedroom house, which never really existed before, but due to government deregulation, i.e. permitted development, is enabled these houses to become bigger and bigger and bigger, so that they become an overdevelopment in a local community. I know your hands are tied, and I know that this government has also decided to deregulate even further, and to say that you have to have strong reasons now for opposing, for refusing a planning application. So they're on the side of the developer there, making it harder for you to reject something. Even if it went off to appeal, I don't doubt from the inquiries that have been made and the report from the officers, I think that a planning inspector would look at this and say, yeah, you did it for all the right reasons, and I don't think the city would be charged in these circumstances. I have to completely agree with Mr. Keating. Although anybody climbing over his wall, I'm sure, will be severely reasoned with and explained why they shouldn't do it. But it is an issue. Is there a condition that could be put on to say, I don't know, and Mrs. Gill might advise you, is there a condition that can be put on to preserve the residential amenities of Mr. Keating next door, that they should not go down that side alleyway in order to effect works to the property? I think that is a reasonable condition to say they shouldn't go down there with noise and cart machinery down there, and that they should go through the front door.
Councillor Hunt, you're coming to the end of your time.
Yes, I've really pressed the point, I think, of the unfairness of not including unauthorised, which are transparently, obviously, unauthorised HMOs, not including them in the figures. There may be a reason around law for it, but I still think it's completely wrong, and if there is a law, then the law is an ass on that.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I have covered everything. I'd urge you to reject the application.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, questions around this? Councillor Hugh Mason.
Could the officers confirm that my mathematics is correct, that if we consider the two additional properties which have been mentioned this morning, 80 Gladys Avenue and 101 Gladys Avenue, the addition of 85 Gladys Avenue, which is the item before us, would only then bring the proportion of HMOs within a 50-metre radius to 9.2%.
You're quite correct, Councillor Mason. Even if, and I'll explain why we shouldn't count the other two, but even if number 80 and any other property, even if two more properties and number 85 were counted, we would arrive at 9.2, still within the policy threshold. So if I may, Chairman.
Thanks, Simon.
If I go to the main points about the HMO numbers, the issue about Councillor Hunt is kindly pointed out that some are licensed but without planning permission. Those are 38 and 58 Gladys that are outside the 50-metre radius, which we understand now, but you're asking the wider question. Well, we don't just rely on one data set, it's the combination of 3 data sets, and then whatever anything else may say, as in this instance, and we go and explore further. So for numbers 38 and 58, I dare say they are only licensed and no planning permission. They might have existed since before planning permission was required, when the Article 4 was introduced in 2012. It's those sorts of reasons will explain why a property, if an HMO, isn't necessarily on each of the 3 data sets, council tax, licensing and planning history. So hopefully that's explained what might appear to be an anomaly. And to count, so number 80, we're all satisfied, does appear to be an unlawful HMO, but to count it in the determination of this application, it will be getting things the wrong way round. We don't know whether number 80 opposite, which appears to be an unlawful HMO, may or may not get planning permission. If they apply for it, it would be wrong to count that in now. Imagine if you counted number 80 And then if you add 85, it takes it over the 10%, and you refuse 85. You'd be refusing 85 on something that an undetermined outcome at number 80. Number 80 is unlawful. Therefore, we don't count it because we don't know the outcome, and it's first come, first served. This applicant has applied some months ago for planning permission. He shouldn't have his queue jumped by someone else who hasn't applied at all. So it's in order is the only sensible way to do it. We do still look at, as we're discussing today, what else is going on around, but ultimately you've got to do things in the correct order. And if number 80 loses out later because it breaches the 10%, that's hard luck for that one, but that's the order to do it. So back to Mr. Keating. Thank you, Mr. Keating. Remaining on the numbers, I've just explained why number 80 wouldn't therefore be counted. Even if it were, it doesn't breach the policy. Number 101 you also referred to as an HMO. That is just outside the 50-metre radius, just outside. We can show it on the plan if you like. Lastly, the matter of security. Yes, burglary is devastating even if nothing's taken. The alleyway has a door on the front, as far as I can see from photographs, and a gate on the back of it. As I said before, there's no change in circumstances materially to the use of that alleyway. There are 8 or 10 properties using it now. There'll be 8 or 10 residential properties using it afterwards. So there's no material change in the use and activity of that. If 85 is approved, the occupiers don't have to use it anyway. They might not choose to use the bike storage. They might all walk or take the bus, etc. But you can't really confidently say, reasonably say, there's any difference in occupation and use of that alleyway to say it's got to be conditioned. I think the applicant has been willing to help by putting some sort of shared code or key on it, which may not exist at the moment, I don't know. So that seems like a voluntary and helpful improvement. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the issue of the numbers. Looking at the map, it seems to me that your 50-metre circle goes through the middle of number 99.
Correct.
And it doesn't hit 101.
Correct.
Okay. I am, though, concerned about the issue of number 80. Because of the decision that this committee made last time, which I didn't agree with and still don't agree with, we said that if somebody has got an HMO which has been in use illegally for some time, we doesn't need to come here for a planning permission. Now, I think that was it was a decision of the committee, but it does open that up to landlords coming here and saying, oh, well, actually, I've been here for years, I don't need planning permission, it's fine. That seems to me to completely change the way in which the counts need to be done, so that number 80 would need to be included, because the decision of this committee was that if they came for a certificate of lawful development, then they didn't need to have planning permission. Therefore, that seems to me to mean that anything that is in here at number 80 where there is evidence has to be counted because of the decision of the last committee. If the committee had made a different decision, then I think, Simon, you'd have an argument, but because we followed your advice, I don't think we do have an argument. You do have an argument. So I think it doesn't, in this case, it doesn't take it over the 10% anyway, but I think it is absolutely clear that it should always be included where there is evidence that a building has a building is being used. So I think I would be very, very clear that one should be included within the count. It doesn't take it over 10% in this case, but I think in future cases it's absolutely clear that if that did happen, then it would be absolutely necessary for that number, for that HMO to be used in the count. I'm very, very pleased to hear from Mr. Keating that the MP in Portsmouth North is prepared to fight her government on HMOs. Both the last government and this government have been very clear through through the planning process that they're very keen to have more housing, and their instructions to the planning inspectorate has been to say let them through, let them happen. If you're able to persuade Amanda to rebel against the government and fight this one, I think lots of people will be very pleased on this committee. But we'll see what actually happens as opposed to warm words. We've learnt with some MPs that warm words are easy to say, action is more difficult to see. So, Simon, can we go back to you in terms of the numbers? I think from the decision last time we have absolutely no choice but to include number 80 within the count.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand what you're saying. I can assist. The application last week at, I think, 37 Henderson Road, last time I should say, was for an intensification of use of one person. This is a change of use from C3 dwelling house to a sui generis HMO. So you can't do that lawfully by way of a lawful development certificate. So it's a different scenario to the one we had, the lawful development certificate we had last time. Not a comparable situation, just for completeness.
All right, and actually in this case it won't make a difference, but we may have a fight about this later. Okay, colleagues, any other questions? No, in terms of comments, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry, but I can see no defendable reason that we could take to an appeal and win on this occasion. It's below the 10% count. If this one goes through, then any others are, I think, becomes more difficult, because then I think they are hitting the 10% rule. All the rooms are within the right sizes, and therefore that reason to say no doesn't exist. So I can see no reason not to propose the officer recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smythe, thank you. Are there any other proposals? No, can I see those in favour? Please show. Those against, please show. Those abstaining, there aren't anybody because there aren't any more. So that planning permission is granted. Thank you very much indeed for coming, ladies and gentlemen, for that one. Let's now move on to 194 Laburnum Grove.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application at 194 Laburnum Grove for a change of use of what's currently a C3 dwelling house to a flexible use of either within Class C3 or a Class C4 house of multiple occupation, HMO. You'll see we set out in the report what that means, and effectively, if granted, there's an ability to switch back and forth between C3 as a single dwelling house and C4 as a small HMO for a period of 10 years if the plan permission is enacted. So this is a property highlighted here, and you see the aerial view here and the very much consistent nature of the housing stock in the surrounding area. Here's property here highlighted for those of you who attended the site visit for the following item at 275 is again a similar form of house, a mid-terrace property. In terms of your HMO count data, so we are 4 current HMOs within the 50-metre radius. There's 60 properties within the 50-metre radius. We've double-checked those blue dots. There are, the reason why there are not 60 blue dots on there is because a number of the properties are subdivided as one up, one down flats, which is why there are 60 properties within that circle. So with the additional HMO proposed, that would bring the proposed density as shown to 5 out of 60 at 8.3%, and so is below the 10% in the HMO SPD. Here's the existing elevations of the property. These are large properties, and there's no proposals to extend these to provide the HMO. The only physical change is a replacement of a window here which currently serves as kitchen, and you'll see with the revised layout, it'd be replaced with another window here. So this is raised elevation. So the only physical external change is this new window here. So in terms of the layout, so we have 2 bedrooms to the ground floor, both en suite, the communal living dining space to the rear, the 3 rooms at first floor level, or again, we're en suite. You'll see we've rehearsed in the report that these comply with your standards in terms of both the bedroom sizes and the communal space. And also we've clarified the point that 2 of the rooms could be double occupied under our standards, but we would still be compliant with our space standards, both in terms of the bedroom size and the communal living spaces as well. And then just final view of the property, just highlighted from an aerial view. So, Chair, yes, so we confirmed we double-checked that 50-metre radius exercise, and it's correct. We have an allegation, as noted in the report again, about an authorised HMO at number 189. We have investigated that. Public sector housing have visited that property. They have found no evidence of the HMO. We have contacted the waste team, and again, they've confirmed there's no additional collections, no records of excess rubbish. Public sector housing have gone as far as to contact the university, and they've got no records of students against that particular address. And we've also investigated the electoral roll, and no evidence of additional unrelated people at that particular address. So all of the evidence that's been presented of that additional HMO is hearsay, and there's no documentary evidence to that effect. So we are satisfied it's not a HMO as it stands at the moment, and therefore the number of HMOs exercised is correct. Just checking the SMAT for any further updates. Yes, just to clarify the report that we are recommending a conditional permission, and just to highlight there have been an additional representation received, but those matters raised are all addressed in the report, and the application is recommended for approval, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we have Mr. Stevens. Thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, my name is Jeff Stevens, and with my wife, I'm the owner-occupier. We are the owner-occupiers of number 196 Laburnum Grove, which shares a party wall with the HMO, which is presently under development and is the subject of this application. Now, my comments are in 2 parts. One, first of all, how it affects us personally. I understand that actually technical matters seem to matter a great deal more, but nevertheless, I do want to go through so that you understand why we don't particularly want to live next to an HMO. And then secondly, I do want to make a few comments about your index calculation, although I think I've learned in this meeting today some facts which were not made available to me earlier. Okay, we have 3 objections personally. The first is to do with noise. For 35 years, we've lived next to a single unit of accommodation, and now we feel we might be confronted with 5 units of accommodation, and this clearly increases the risk that we're going to be able to hear people's TVs, conversations, music, and all the other kind of noises you get from the activities of daily living. This is not an attractive prospect for us. Second, parking. We occasionally have reason to return to the area at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night in our vehicle. And at the moment, we have to park near Mayfield School because this is a large area of the city which has not got any housing in it, and so it doesn't generate any cars needed parking. This is an 8 to 10 minute walk from where we live. The distance perhaps is not so much of a problem, but when we make that walk, it's quite rare for us to pass a road junction where cars are not, or other vehicles are not parked illegally on the double yellow lines. And at the same time, it's very rare for us to find spaces. on that 8-minute walk. And I reckon that if you were to do a survey at that time of night on a weekday evening, you would probably find there are more vehicles parked illegally on double yellowed lines than there are vacant slots. And yet, here is the risk of another 5 vehicles. Now, I understand that bicycle provision is to be made. I use my bicycle a lot, but I don't use it to make journeys out of town, particularly to see our relatives in the north of Scotland. It's quite out of the question. We have a car and it needs to be parked, and I can see no reason why these other people might not want to do so. Thirdly is the loss of community. Now, again, matters today seem to have been very technical, but actually, in a way, this is the thing that bothers me most. We have nice relationships with the people around us. We ask how their families are, how the children are doing. They ask us how things are going on the allotment. And I wonder about the people that are moving into this HMO, into these bed sits. Are they going to want to stay there very long? No, they're going to be transient people who just can't wait to move on to something better. We shall miss this sense of community a lot. Now, I'd like to turn to the index calculation. I suppose in my ignorance of this matter, I thought that if an illegal HMO were found, then perhaps it would count in the calculation. It appears now that apparently it doesn't. Now, also, I've just heard some evidence which I have not heard previously about the activities of private sector housing to find out if indeed 189 is an illegal HMO. I have a couple of neighbours who are convinced it is. When I heard from the planning department that they could find no evidence in the electoral roll or the council tax register or the land registry, I thought that was just a dereliction of duty, that nobody had actually been out. And of course, it was only when I got in touch with private housing that somebody seemed to go out. I understand they have visited and weren't able to contact anyone in the property. Again, the evidence that I've heard doesn't, although it says, oh, yes, we have no evidence that this is an HMO, of course that doesn't mean that it is not an HMO. It could still be and perhaps needs further investigation. Yeah, okay. Anyway, what I would point out about the index is that if this 6th property were indeed an HMO, it would make, it might give you some leeway, I would say, to reject the application. Why? Because when I first looked at that pink zone map, I thought I could only see 59 properties. Well, I reproduced the map on my own system at home, my own geographical information system, and sure enough, there is a 60th property. 0.2% of its area is within the zone, which I understand is permissible. That's 2/1000 of the area of that property is within the zone and makes it counted in. Now, if it were counted in as a property and we had the 6th HMO, that would be 6 over 60, and that's quite an easy bit of calculation, isn't it? That's exactly 10%. I hear the planner say it's got to be over 10%. It's got to be 10.1%, which I'll put to you is 1/1000th. Now, obviously, as I say, I was working under the erroneous impression that what might turn out to be an illegal HMO should be counted in the concentration index, but apparently it doesn't seem to be the case. I can see I'm nearly over my 6 minutes, but I just have one more point I want to make. There is an issue of sandwiching in your guidance, and it's true that there is no sandwiching in this case. We don't have a single property with HMOs on either side. But if you consider ours at 196 and 198, our neighbour, we are 2 properties with 4 HMOs around us. 4 HMOs around us. 2 to the left of us, 1 to the right of our neighbour at 198, and 1 behind us. Now again, I hear the planner say, but an HMO which has an entrance on an adjacent street shouldn't be considered when sandwiching is thought about. Well, I can tell you that when the weather gets better and the residents of that HMO are out in their nice communal area, I can hear them just as easily as I can hear people to the left and to the right.
Mr. Keating, we're at time.
Well, my name is Mr. Stevens.
Oh,
but,
sorry,
anyway,
Mr. Stevens.
yes,
Sorry,
7
Mr.
minutes.
Stevens,
Yes,
my
7,
apologies.
I beg your pardon. Anyway, I urge the committee to reject this application, and not just for the impact on ourselves, but also because it seems to me that we've got rather a lot of HMOs near us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Farr.
Thank you. So as far as an HMO application goes, this is one of the more straightforward ones. There's no extensions, no dormers. It's literally just a C4. There's a little bit of internal reconfiguration and repurposing of the lounge areas to turn it from a 3-bed house to a 5-bed house. The existing large 3-bed house is more than capable of accommodating the same amount of people, so it's considered to be an adequate size. The existing form has almost 60 square metres of space on the ground floor, and the remainder will still be in excess of what is required for 5 people. Limiting the occupancy to 5 means all bedrooms can exceed the minimum size standards. I'm not sure if the requirements for a 5-bed C4 are the same as they would be for a 7 or 8 bed, but needless to say, this property is very spacious for the number of residents, and all would have their own en-suites. The finished product would be of a high quality to provide a good level of accommodation for future occupiers. And in case you're wondering at what point we'll be coming back with the larger scheme, to the very best of my knowledge, we won't be. We could have probably squeezed a 6th room in, but we worked to the client's requirements, and this is what has been requested. We don't encourage them to make them larger, we tell them what's possible, and they direct us. So we're asking for a 5-bed, and it's proposed to be a 5-bed and nothing more. So given that the use of the site is little more different to the existing and it meets all the set standards, it's respectfully asked that the application is approved today.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, just to make sure, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison are not here, and I don't think Councillor Swan is here either. Okay. Okay, colleagues, questions? I have, so, David, can I come back? So my count of dots, although there were that are within the circle, is 52. Could I have the addresses where, which I think should appear, because we talked about this yesterday at the briefing, could we have the addresses of those extra ones that push it up over 52?
Bear with me 2 seconds.
Colleagues, just to let you know, at the briefing, I did say that there are an awful lot of dots on here that are outside the 50-metre radius, and I don't understand why they're there because they're not counted. So I've asked in future that we shouldn't just have extra ones put in for decoration.
Yes, that was just the way that the system works. So we did correct that, Chair. So in relation to that information, so number 179 is a first floor and ground floor flat, so 2 units there. Number 187 is 1 up, 1 down. Number 190 is divided into 2 flats, 1 up, 1 down. And number 206 is divided up, 1 up and 2 down. In addition, number 48 is also as 2 units from the database. Yes, so that accounts for your additional.
Thanks. So that's an additional 5 to my 52, makes it 57 that I think is the base number we're operating from.
No, Chair, there is 60 units. I'm really confirming this. I do have the spreadsheet in front of me. There are 60 units within that 50-metre radius. I've got 60 rows, 60 addresses. I don't wish to spend the entire time for the committee reading them all out, but there are 60 properties, Chair.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Councillor Dare, welcome back. As you weren't here at the beginning of this application, you can't take place in any vote. Okay. I think there's the policy issues that Mr. Stevens brings up in terms of being surrounded. I think he's right. I know I get more complaints about how people use gardens and outside space when there are large numbers of people living in a house than I do about inside space. And I think that's something that we probably I wonder if the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy might take away and look at. This committee can't say you have to, but it would be an area to look at.
Drop me an email and I will act on any of your emails, Chairman.
I will see what we can do. Okay, so my concern is if we're at 60, or my count is 57, but there are already 4. This would make 5, and we have one that is illegal or not registered that that people are concerned about. That would take us over the 10% threshold. Where David?
No, the Chair, that's incorrect. So there's a couple of things. Even if you do account all of those 2 additional, the approved one and an additional one, that takes you to 6 out of 60, that's 10%. And the HMO SPD says over 10%. If you're at 10%, you're policy compliant. Second reason is, there's a very good reason, as Mr. Turner's explained, why we don't count unlawful HMOs, because in effect that's rewarding people for bypassing the system. If someone operates an unlawful HMO without getting consent, and that tips a balance for someone who's applied for planning permission, in effect we've rewarded someone for bypassing the system. We should absolutely not do that. We should what we should do is have a plan-led system, which we are trying to operate, whereby when people apply for planning permission, we apply our guidance and our policies correctly to the ones that are known and are lawful. And anyone who has undertaken to change the use without consent should not, in effect, as Mr. Turner said, jump the queue and be rewarded for doing that.
So can I ask, when we have things coming for certificate of lawful development, all they need to show is they've used it like that for 5 years, and then they get an automatic, yes, you've got planning permission. Is that correct?
No. Because there's an Article 4 over the entire city area, it needs planning permission. So as a change of use, they would have to have done that for 10 years between C3 and C4. So they won't be rewarded until they've done it for 10 years, and they would have to show that they've done that continuously to our satisfaction. So, just to be clear, we do need to distinguish between the issue of whether an additional person in a unit of a HMO is a material change of use, which is what you're going to look at in 275 Laburnum Road in the next item, against what's a planning application here, whereby the applicant accepts they are a C3 dwelling house, they're applying for a C4 use because we have the Article 4 control over that, over the whole city, and therefore that's a planning application which we need to determine on its merits, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor North.
Can I just get clarification of bedroom 2, please? It says it's 10.2 square metres of usable space. Where you've got the door entry going in, you've also got the bathroom door to the right, which means that section is unusable. Can I have a clarification that it is still over 10 square metres, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So is the suggestion that that's not an unusable space? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We would work on the basis that as a general rule, the occupier isn't going to leave their door open. In the nature of these uses, they'd have locked doors for their own security, and I believe that's a requirement from the licensing side as well. So, actually, in actual fact, I think that unusable spaces would be, in effect, a sort of transient issue of going in, going out, and in the overwhelming majority of the time, you would have the 10 plus square metres as usable space within the room. And it's inevitable, as I say, going in and out, that you would need that clear space for the doorway to open and close, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No, okay. Comments, proposals, Councillor Candlish.
Just one quick comment. We consistently get people asking questions about noise, and when we get into it, we actually find out that there is going to be changes to insulation levels because it's a more modern structure or something. Is that the case in this property, that we are expecting insulation standards to be coming up? And more generally, is this something that could be put in the report to avoid us having to go through this each time?
Chair, so it's my understanding it's not part of the requirements in the HMO SBD, so it's not a planning requirement. Maybe that licensing are applying a different standard. In planning terms, we would have an enormous difficulty in alleging that a change from a C3 to C4 creates unreasonable noise, because in planning terms it's simply a residential use. As we've said a number of times before, elsewhere it's simply permitted development to flip between C3 and C4. You don't actually need any form of consent at all. It's only because of the Article 4 that we're able to discuss this today. So in planning terms, no, there's a wealth of decisions that I've read since joining the authority on the HMOs. We've argued the noise aspect, and the inspectors will not give weight to that because they view it as a normal residential use and work on the basis of a typical neighbourly residential use by occupiers.
Okay, any other comments? I have to say I'm not particularly happy with this one, but I don't think there are any supportable grounds. I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens, that we would win at appeal. I think there are things to be learnt from this one for others, but I think, therefore, with regret, I'm going to propose officer recommendation. Can I see, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Candlish. Are there any other proposals? No. Can I see those in favour of granting planning permission and those against? Okay, planning permission is granted, or we would have granted if, I'm sure, Juliet, you will write the right words.
No, Chair, this one's not.
So,
that was the previous item. Which
sorry, it's a simple one. Sorry, beg your pardon. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for coming. And we now move on to, now, we've got Councillor Russell Simpson, who is here. At his request, could we do Montague Road next, which is item 7? Would that be acceptable to colleagues? Okay, so is that going to cause mayhem with the IT? Woohoo! Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Stevens, thank you very much indeed for coming. Okay. Is this David or Simon? Simon, hello.
Thank you, Chairman. We have an application at 54 Montague Road in Hilsea for a change of use from a dwelling house class C3 to a 7-bed, 7-person house in multiple occupation. The application has come to committee because of the number of objections received. And we have Councillor Simpson, of course, to speak in due course. And so to make sure I don't forget, in the supplementary matters report, just an amendment to the time period for the Section 111 legal agreement for SPA mitigation. Just some words missing off the end of it. It's a change to the date just to keep everything aligned. So the last words should read, if a legal agreement has not been satisfactorily agreed, no later than Friday the 21st of February. Just to clear that up. Thank you. Right, so an application for change of use from C3 to sui generis. So Montague Road is east-west. You can see it in the middle of the picture with the red edge site. Thank you. Just Stubbington Avenue is the east-west road to the immediate south, and the London Road roundabout at the top end of North End is just to the west. Montague Road is a one-way road for traffic from west to east. And if we have a look at the property, there we are, traditional Portsmouth terraced house, proposed for conversion to an HMO. With respect to the 50-metre radius and our policy for mixed and balanced communities, there is an HMO next door, which you can see with the purple triangle in the middle of the picture, and one to the east on Beresford Road. So that is 2 out of 63. If this application were approved, 3 out of 63 is 4.76%, so well below the 10% threshold we use to indicate a mixed or balanced community. So it's in accordance with your policy. With respect to the application for the building, traditional, slightly wider fronted property, so we have the big 3 living rooms downstairs and then a rear wing with a kitchen and other accretions. Upstairs, 3 good-sized bedrooms and a bathroom. That will be proposed for conversion to the 7 bedrooms, labelled 1 to 7 there. If I take you through from the ground floor, come in through the front door, WC under the stairs, right into bedroom 6 with an ensuite. Behind that, bedroom 7 with an ensuite, and then into the back, which is replacing, this is a prior approval extension already in the gift of the applicant, to replace the existing rear accretions you saw a moment ago. That is the kitchen dining room, 25.6 square metres, so well above the 22.5 required. There's also a laundry stroke tank room there. Thank you. Upstairs, 3 more bedrooms, each en suite, and then into the roof, which would be a permitted development loft extension to the rear, 2 more bedrooms, each with en suite. So as the report sets out, all the bedrooms meet the required standard, in this instance 10 square metres, and a few are quite a bit above that, and with the en suites plus shared WC, all those side of things are suitable. So from that point of view, the amenity offered for the living for the proposed occupiers is deemed acceptable by officers. We've got the objections from the neighbours, and I think I've covered the main things there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simpson. Actually, no, you go. Sorry, you go last, don't you?
I'll
Mr.
go
Farr.
last.
Yes, Mr. Farr.
Thank you. I briefly referred to 2-step applications earlier. That is something we're trying to steer away from these days. It was useful in the past due to things like COVID and the nitrates hold up and whatnot. This is an example of us getting straight to the point based on what the client wanted. The ultimate goal was a sui generis HMO, and we've presented them with a design that can achieve that goal. Going back to the 2 steps, there may be some older C4s that want to expand in the future, and if it's a way for it to be done, we're not going to turn the business away. Obviously, we're keen to stress that the modern day HMO differs greatly from the old unregulated bedsits that people think about. As usual with this particular kind of project, we have a property adequately designed for occupation by the number of individuals. All rooms are of a good size with adequate communal space. There's a nice roof lantern in the kitchen to provide the additional lights, and all room sizes take into account usable space and the appropriate head height. The property also has the additional benefit of rear access, so the bikes can go straight into what is quite a good-sized garden rather than through the house. People talk about the high rental prices for high-standard rooms with en-suites, but it's important to point out that all the bills are included. In the current climate, it's not unusual for the bills to match the rent, if not exceed, so it's a viable option for professionals as opposed to the cost of a 1-bedroom flat. I recognise that this one is next door to another HMO, but there is a limit in place, and outside of Portsmouth I've only encountered one authority with a tighter limit, and nobody else has the database like Portsmouth do either. I personally do HMO counts for the clients based on the available data, and if I think the density is too close to an imbalance, we'll discourage them from moving forward with the project. And that doesn't matter whether it's 10% of 50 or 5% of 100, because they're both the same number. So once again, planning permission is requested today, and I hope you recognise the acceptability of the scheme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Just to make everyone aware, this is an HMO in the south of Hillsey, but it's really North End to be exact. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that also residents are concerned about. So obviously the impacts of amenity on neighbouring residents, highways, parking, always everyone's favourite, waste, impact on the silent habitat sites, but also layouts, concerned about bedrooms, 1 with the head height and 4 with space, concerns about bedrooms being double occupancy, need for a long-term sustainable housing solution for the city, reduce the HMO density 10% rule to 5% to maintain mixed and balanced communities, as written here, and community properties for families contribute to the community feel loss of family dwellings, including teachers who need such accommodation. But I wanted to add just another, which wasn't on here, and that's the undocumented HMOs and even a hostel down this road. I don't think, I'm not sure if the planning know about it, but I've had many residents come forward about both those things. As my fellow councillors in Stampshire, Buckland and North End would probably agree, parking is a logistic nightmare in North End, and Montague Road is no exception, especially considering at the bottom, and this is where this application with the T is, of this application is Beresford Road. That has multiple WL lines on both sides that take an additional 8 and 10 parking spaces away. Parking is a material change, and I don't think that's been considered. What I would like the committee to look at is actually 8.7, which gives you the layout requirements. Now, we are always told that applications are not by numbers. However, I find it disappointing that the applicant couldn't supply residents and this committee with exact bathroom sizes. I want to highlight bathroom 6 and 2. Both of these bathrooms seem inadequate and small, so much so if there was an emergency and one was on the loo, you would be knocked out by the door. And I say that as someone that has inflammatory bowel disease, and sometimes you have to be a little bit longer and there might be an emergency. But if you even look at the layout, you can see that bathroom 6 is a third smaller than bathroom 7. So I'm not completely confident with the fact that it says range from 2.7 to 3.54. I'm not really convinced by those numbers. I personally think that it's probably one under. Probably number 6 and number 2 is probably under 2.74. And this is surprising considering these rooms are 50% above the required standard. And I would normally suggest a viewing. However, I personally think this is a poorly designed HMO and should be refused so the layout of the bathrooms be bigger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I apologise for the sound, the noise, but I presume we have heavy metal tonight. David, could you comment on the issue of the size of the bathrooms? Or Simon?
Thank you. In this instance, the case officer, rather than setting out all 7, he's gone to a bit of shorthand here. But to confirm, he's measured them all, and they range from a minimum of 2.74 to a maximum of 3.54, all of which comply with the standard. So it's just that he hasn't listed each one out individually. That's the first time I've seen this, but we can revert to type next time to avoid the issue.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, colleagues, any questions? No questions? Okay, comments? Matthew. Councillor Cordy, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Again, we're looking at a very heavily populated road for parking. Residents have got massive concerns about this area of parking, and again, it's as if our hands are tied, but I just wanted to put it on record that I do feel for them.
I completely agree, and I think it is very disappointing that government inspectors decide that parking issues are not something that they're interested in, because they clearly live in places with private drives and don't have to cope with what we all have to cope with. But such is the same with government civil servants. Okay, there is, as far as I can see, there is no reason that any defendable reason to appeal to say no to this. So I'll move the officer recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Candlish. Is there another proposal? Councillor Vallely. Okay. Okay. You just bought a picture for £2 million. Please have your chequebook later. If that's the only proposal on the table, can I see those in favour? Please show. Those against, please show. Thank you very much. Planning permission is granted. Okay, let's move back to 275 Laburnum Grove. And actually, it was a very useful site visit, I have to say, for those people who made it. Okay, 275.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you've highlighted, members carried out a site visit. The committee carried out a site visit yesterday where we were able to inspect inside the property to see the room concerned and also the living space and also an unoccupied bedroom within the property as well. But just going back to the fundamentals, so this is the site here on the north side of Laburnum Grove, as you'd have seen, and the property indicated there, just here. Again, typical of the road, as we've already seen, the nature of the property here, works under construction at our time of our previous visit. Just to confirm the point, in terms of the 50 metre, it is already a HMO, and the proposal is to go from 6 to 7, so this makes no difference to the proportion of HMOs within the 50 metre radius. Just to confirm, as we saw from the site visit, the works to the roof have been undertaken and those extensions are completed and provided. But just to highlight a point that was apparent from the site visit, part of the proposal in relation to the room that we inspected is to add a roof light, and that roof light was not in situ at the time. So in making a decision about the acceptability of the scheme, it needs to have due regard to the fact that the proposal is to install an additional roof light which will provide additional light into that room. That hasn't been done yet, so our decision needs to be made on the basis of that understanding that the proposal will provide additional light. But just to confirm a point asked at the site visit, the size of this opening, which is the current window, does not change. The idea is the proposal is to add additional light through a roof light. And then, so just going back to what was originally proposed and approved as a layout with this as a living space, and now the proposal is to use that as a bedroom, as we saw at the site visit. Just confirming the point of what we saw within the site from the yard and the communal space. Just checking on the SMAT for our update. So yes, we confirmed the part about the site visit taking place. In relation to the proposal, also the applicant has paid the nitrates in the event that the committee decide that a material change of use has taken place and planning permission is required. So, starting from the beginning, our position is that as a HMO with 6 occupants, there is no material change of use to use the additional bedroom as a 7th room. So there's no material change of use from the existing lawful use of the property to the additional occupier. So that's our starting point, and therefore that's why our recommendation is as an unconditional permission. And in the event that the committee disagree with that, then they would need to determine the application needs planning permission and attach conditions as appropriate. But as I say, our position remains and has always been that when we look at these schemes on their merits and the nature of the proposed changes, that in this instance our view is there is no material change of use for the additional occupier in this property, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We don't have any deputations on this item. So I think the first thing we have to do, as David has said, is decide whether we're going to keep to our accepted practice and say that it does need planning permission, and I'm happy to propose that on the basis that planning permission for 6 people is for 6 people and for more is more, and therefore must need planning permission, as is plainly obvious to anybody who speaks English. But for the additional thing, we know this is an area we've just heard with real problems in terms of parking, and we know from evidence that additional people we have more complaints from HMOs than we do from owner-occupied houses, and therefore increasing the density potentially makes that worse, and in terms of both antisocial behaviour and rubbish. And I'm happy to propose that as normal. Do I have a seconder?
I'd like to second, Chair.
You didn't get there first. Councillor North got there first. Can I see those in favour of it needing planning permission, please show. Thank you, that is unanimous. Colleagues, questions. So the bit, David, I thought the site visit was incredibly helpful. Having looked at it, I thought, particularly going into the communal area, it was done at a really good standard, and they clearly done a decent job. The issue is that room that we went into, the bedroom, even though the tenant was clearly happy, was very dark, and if we look at the plan where the roof light is, David, my concern is that the roof overhangs almost all of it. And therefore the additional light that you might, so if you look where, so yes, you're there, and then if you move over to the first floor, David, and point it out there, and then on the second floor, you've only got a little corner of it that's not overhung by the roof. Well, or the roof, the eaves or whatever. So my concern is, if you've got a roof light that is almost completely covered by building, how much extra light that might produce. But David, have you a view?
Yes, I believe we had this discussion when we deferred it before. Just to assist your decision making, all I'm going to do is just highlight the fact that that's just an overhang of the eaves there. So if you look, it's not a solid part of the property there. So if we think about this let me go back to this. If we think about this in terms of your suggestion about this is blocking all of that view, in effect that is that overhang there, and that's set up 2 to 3 metres above the actual roof light. So it's not a solid aspect there which is going all the way down, it's simply that part there. So depending on the angle of the sun, depending on the time of day, so thinking about this, so if your property here, as your sun comes along here, that little overhang causes a shadow back over in one direction. As it comes over to the south, it's in a different direction. By the time you're in the west, the shadow is going back into the wall. So it's just to clarify that point, that it isn't a solid structure all the way down overhanging that part, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smythe?
I enjoyed the site visit. It's always good to see a basically good product coming at the end of the day. I would like to ask how technically and legally we can enforce what is clearly shown on the plan, which is a decent size roof light, which would solve the problem of having to have the light on all day in that room. What in practice would we do?
In the circumstances, so you've concluded needs planning permission, you can attach a condition. So as a prerequisite, if the roof light, for light and for the occupier, we would just put a time limit, on delivering that 3 months of the light, so that we've then got an enforceable condition to ensure that it's delivered.
Okay, well, I think that's a good reason that we're looking at the planning application, and if there aren't further questions, I would move that we did
So
that.
we'll come back. So, Councillor Mason. No? No? Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Comments? Councillor Adair, you were first this
Got there
time.
first on that occasion. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I haven't been on this committee for very long, but during the time I have been here, I've sat here frequently, and we've been told the addition of one person to an HMO doesn't have much of an effect. So I'm going to disagree with that. Because I think if it was just one person living here, 2 people, 3 people, one person probably wouldn't make a great deal of difference. But in these cases, 6 or 7 people already live there. So the addition of one person, I think, does have a serious effect on the amenity of the address. I know a lot of these places have en-suites, but for those premises that don't have en-suites, that's one more person that's got to use the toilet, got to use the shared bathroom, going to be crammed into the communal TV room, it's got to use the kitchen when the other 7 or 8 people aren't using it. So I think one person does make a material difference. So I really would disagree with the constant assumption that one person doesn't make additional problems. And I think we're also in a position now where we're getting very close in many areas to the 10% rule. So I think landlords are now looking to utilise any Harry Potter cupboard under the stairs for another room. I think it's just really a case that we're just flinging another sardine into the can. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a proposal?
I'd like to. I think we're probably going to be duty-bound to allow it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to propose that we say no, and that we reject this on the basis that that room, when we looked at it, was very, very dark, and putting in a light source which is covered, almost completely covered by the roof, wouldn't produce enough light. So I think that would be, and it's a north-facing garden as well. Therefore, for that reason, I would propose that we reject this planning application and say no. I don't know if I have a seconder for that.
I'll second it.
No, Councillor Cordy. Councillor, all right. So that's one proposal. I have a proposal from Councillor Smythe to give planning permission, but with a condition, as I understand it, that the roof light goes in within a 3-month period.
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
Councillor Valley, are you
Yeah.
happy to second that? Okay. Okay. So the proposal to refuse was seconded first. So we hear that. I think we, Juliet, do we do that one first?
Yes, was that your first time that you said you were going to second it just then?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can I see those in favour of refusal, please show?
Chair, I did just want to clarify that your reason for refusal was inadequate light and therefore unacceptable living conditions for an occupier. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can I see those in favour of refusal, please show? Those against, please show. Okay, that's tied, so it's 4-4. As a casting vote, I'll keep to the same. So that is refused. Okay, last application is 59 Goldsmith Avenue.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 59 Goldsmith Avenue for the change of use from a dwelling house class C3 to purposes falling within classes C3 dwelling house or C4 house of multiple occupation. So that means if granted planning consent, the owner could change between C3 and C4 without needing to apply for planning permission again for a 10-year period after the consent is issued, if that is the outcome. The application has come to committee due to 12 neighbour objections. Goldsmith Avenue, members are familiar with the road, I'm sure, stretching from Milton across to North Southsea, facing across in this instance to Milton Park opposite. And we have Clovelly Road is the side road, and this property is one of those corner properties that's common in Portsmouth that has the front door on the side of the property. We go to the next photograph, please. There it is. So it's a semi-detached house, the front garden, and you can just make out the corner road turning the corner. Could we perhaps go forward 4 or 5 slides, David, to the next photographs? Thank you very much. So top left, you can see again the front of the property facing Goldsmith Avenue, and then turning the corner into Clovelly Road. The bottom left photograph shows the Clovelly Road elevation, so you can make out the front door on the side of the property. At the rear, the lean-to, sort of conservatory lean-to, would be removed. Thank you. And then bottom right is the rear of the property. That's the garage that the applicant has suggested they will keep, and therefore could be used for bike storage and any other sort of storage. Thank you. We could go back probably to the 50-metre radius. The 50-metre radius, just 27 properties because none opposite in the park, so it's a more sensitive, or percentage that's more sensitive to change. Existing HMO at number 45, just on the eastern side of the radius, you can see there. If this were approved, we'd have 2 out of 27, which is 7.41%, so within your policy guidelines for a mixed and balanced community. With respect to the physical works proposed to the property, there's the existing, so you can see the front of the house, the bay window, bottom left, etc. Top left, the side of the property, and the front door is hidden in the shadow there. Thank you, David. So we have 2 big living rooms in the main body of the property at ground floor, and then 2 further rooms at the back. Excuse me. Just go back one, please, David. Thank you. Thank you. And 2 rooms at the back and a bathroom upstairs. 4 bedrooms, decreasing inside as you go from front to back of the property. This conversion has a minimal intervention, actually. If we look ahead to the next one, please. So the 2 rooms at the rear that I pointed out earlier just knock through into the one communal room, which lots of family houses do anyway. That is 22.9 metres squared, in excess of the 22.5 required. And then the 2 bedrooms downstairs. Upstairs, 3 more bedrooms, and bedroom 5 has been enlarged slightly. You can make out a new wall, which has just made it up to size, and the bathroom behind it is still way and above its size. So and there's a 3rd bathroom there at the back on the 1st floor. So 3 bathrooms, 3 shared bathrooms, 5 bedrooms that all comply with the standard, and the communal living space that also complies. The applicant has stated that they would have 5 single occupancy rooms. Of course, being an application for C3, C4, C4 confers up to 6 residents. As the report sets out, because the bathroom provisions, 3 of them, and the communal space would all be big enough according to your standards and the proposal for 6 residents, and any of the bedrooms 1 to 4 are big enough, more than big enough to have double occupancy, so there's no need to restrict it. The applicant suggested they would like it for 5 single occupancy rooms, but they could actually be, one of them could be a 6th and still easily comply with the standards. Otherwise, we just have supplementary matters, small correction to make sure we have the words conditional permission included at the end of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Farr.
Thank you. I'm joined by the applicant today, who's sat to my right. He's just come to experience the joy of planning committee and had the delightful coincidence that we started with St James's Hospital. So this proposal is a long-term project and investment for the applicant, who told me that ultimately he would like the property to be reverted back to C-free use in the future for his own family to live in when the time comes. As may have been noticed, it's not been brought up in the application, but at the same time we submitted this application, there was an alternative application for a dormer, simply a lawful development certificate. It was assumed not only by neighbours but also by the planning validation team that the success of the dormer application means we would be coming back with a larger scheme, which the committee would not be fond of. You've seen enough of our applications to know if we're going to put a dormer on a larger scheme, then we're just going to do that straight away. This is not a Trojan horse application, it's not a staggered application, it's simply for a C4 property as shown on the plans. If the HMO proposal is not successful today, having the option of the dormer gives the applicant an alternative. And also, due to the corner plot location, we felt that applying for the dormer would also be a good way to establish the agreement with the planners that the front of the house is the principal elevation, regardless of where the front door is. So as I said, the reason the dormer was applied for was an alternative option. There's nothing shady about that. So it can be we're applying for dual use, C3 or C4, and it can be a 5-bedroom HMO or a 3-bedroom family house. If we didn't get the C4 planning, adding a PD dormer can make it a 4 to 5-bedroom family house, which, you know, in terms of resale or renting would make the mortgage payments a lot more comfortable than a 3-bed would. And what you'll see is also quite unusual for HMO proposals that are saying they'll be C3 or C4 is that the two are interchangeable with this property. There's no en-suites, they're separate bathrooms. So you can literally go C3 or C4 without having to remove en-suites from the living room. I think this further demonstrates the honest intentions of the applicant, and it's respectfully asked you consider the application as acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much indeed. Colleagues, any questions? Nope. Comments? Councillor Mason.
It's a good-sized property. It seems ideal for the purposes which have been outlined, and I'd like to propose the officer's recommendation.
Okay, and that's seconded by Councillor Valaday. Are there any other proposals? No. Can I see those in favour of the application, please show. Those against, please show. Planning permission is granted. Thank you very much indeed. That's the concluding of this meeting. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your time today.